we can invite each other back, unless they try to snipe everybody. So.
I got you covered. All right, folks, what's up? This hangout tonight is going to be the role of faith for Christians and non-believers. What inspired me to do this hangout was a conversation I had with G-Man about faith. But basically, Christians get accused quite often of just having blind faith beyond reason. And my take on it is, not only is that demonstrably false for the informed Christian anyway, but atheists are not out of the woods when it comes to using faith. They'll try to pretend all day that they merely have a lack of belief. But the fact of the matter is that acceptable to inerrant reason. Inerrant reasoning as anybody else. They're just as much as susceptible to believing based on mere feelings without good reasons and arguments. So what's you guys' take on this?
Oh, atheists do not have a rationale for their most basic beliefs. They can give them colorful labels and say, well, that they're properly basic beliefs or basal beliefs. But the bottom line is their core beliefs, upon which everything else they reason about is something that they simply choose to believe without warrant or justification. Now, that's blind faith. Whereas from the Christian worldview, our starting point isn't our faith. It's simply a response to the infallible, self-attesting revelation of God. Now, if the non-Christian does not accept that and says, well, I don't accept that, and if the non-Christian or the skeptic is going to attribute that our belief is blind faith, then they're going to have to successfully argue for the non-existence of the Christian God. Unless, of course, they want to say, let's say that it's, well, let me put it this way. If they want to argue that it's not possible for the Christian God to exist, go ahead. And once they successfully do that, then they can attribute our worldview or whatever faith we have as blind faith. But if it's possible that the Christian God exists, then it is not necessarily the case that our faith is blind.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I totally agree with that. But like I said earlier, atheists are susceptible to the same reason. What's sauce for the goose is what's sauce for the gander. And the fact of the matter is that atheists pretend, to take a position or a non-position, rather, they say, so they can basically try to pretend that they're out of the woods when it comes to the element of faith. But the fact of the matter is that if they really think they don't have any burden of proof at all, what is the basis for their non-belief, their lack of belief? If they really think they don't have any burden at all, then as we've pointed out before, their mere lack of belief is just, a condition of their psychological state. That's all it really is. It's not really anything in particular to attack a position or adopt a position of their own. It's just a measure of their psychological state. So it's really a non-issue when they try to say stuff like, "Oh, they merely lack belief," because it doesn't do anything for them, and it's just an intellectually dishonest game, and it doesn't get them out of the woods in regards to their element of faith. Because finished, if they admit that they cannot prove there is no gods. Even they admit that much. And the bottom line is, if they don't offer any reasons for their atheism, then they are participating in faith, whether they, I mean, just mere blind faith, I should say, whether they admit it or not.
Well,
They
this
can
goes to
pretend
show
all day they don't have the burden of proof, but we all know that's not true. Go ahead.
Yeah, again, I mean, we point this out every time we have a discussion with even the seemingly more formidable atheists here in G plus, that their worldview is actually ultimately futile and arbitrary. For example, when you have Floyd and G-Man had their debate several months ago regarding the return of Christ, whether or not he was actually going to come back or on time or whatever. I even told G-Man ahead of time in private that Floyd will not have a real argument against G-Man's position because G-Man is a futurist. He's not a preterist. So the only way that Floyd is going to have a legitimate argument is to argue against the preterist position. So just as I suspected, that's exactly how he argued when he came into the debate. He argued against, all of his points were against the preterist position, not against anything that G-Man was bringing to the table. And yet he, when I corrected Floyd on this issue, he wanted to have the discussion with me. And so basically what it comes down to is that Floyd was trying to attempt to point out an error with the prophecy of Jesus. But then by him doing that, he has to subject himself to an authority that suggests that his interpretation is correct. And the problem is that he cannot find anything objective to validate his circular position. So Floyd doesn't realize that all he has the power to do in such conversations is simply assume that his position is correct and that the opposing view is wrong. So it's basically essentially him saying, nah, boo boo, I'm right, you're wrong. Okay, but what authority are you going to prove that your interpretation is correct? Who says it? And he can't go beyond a human volition.
Did he cite the passage? Did he cite the passage where Jesus said, "And this generation shall not pass"?
Yep, that's the one. That's one of them, actually.
Okay, good. Well, then the problem is, which generation was he talking about? Was he talking about a future generation, or was he talking about his contemporaries?
Yeah, I don't remember what his response to that was, but.
Well, what he'll probably do is they'll probably insist that the majority of times the term "this generation" refers to contemporaries, but that does not logically necessitate that. Therefore, it should always refer to that. And in fact, how many times do historical people speaking, or even politicians or whatever, constantly talk about this generation, meaning our contemporaries, the majority of time? And occasionally they may refer to, let's say, the World War II generation and say, well, this generation was very special because. So the term "this generation" has to be determined by context, not merely or solely how it is used in most contexts. So that's a common mistake that people make in approaching that passage. And they also, did he use the passage where Jesus said, "Some of you standing here will not die until you see the Son of Man coming in his glory"? Did he use that passage?
I've heard him bring that up before, but when I had the discussion with him, he brought up the parable about the 10 virgins, I think, and he was focusing on the word tarry, as if it meant that Jesus was going to be late, or that the prophets thought, or the apostles thought he was going to be late, or that he admitted he was going to be late.
This is the problem. This is the mistake people make. They try to make the parables walk on all fours. In other words, they try to make it to say what is not obvious.
Right.
The parable of the 10 virgins is just simply there were some who were ready and some who were not. That's all.
Yeah, the other discussion I had with him too is, and I think I told you about this before, and Tony, you know about this because you were actually in the room. He attempted to do an internal critique to point out an alleged contradiction between God's moral character.
Yeah.
And he pointed out Deuteronomy, a passage of Deuteronomy 23, I think it was, and tried to contrast that with 1 John 4. And so 1 John 4 says, the verse says, God is love. Then actually he went after that, he went to 1 Corinthians 13, which describes the attributes of love. And then he jumped to some random passage somewhere in Deuteronomy which points out God having pleasure in judging Israel. And so he's trying to use that as a means to point out a contradiction with God's moral character.
There's no contradiction there, because
that's exactly what I
because we have to understand that whenever God is spoken of or described,
right.
So when since God's nature is in totality, is incomprehensible, God has to communicate to us in part, in pieces and ways that we can understand via analogy. So you see, this is what happens is many skeptics will pounce on verses that are idiomatic expressions. Okay.
That's right. That's right.
Okay. So when God says that he takes delight in judging people, it's simply pointing out that God is a righteous judge and he will administer. Like, for example, when God says that he is a jealous God, is God jealous like a husband would be jealous when some neighbor is talking to his wife at a picnic? Okay. No, God does not experience the human mindset or emotion of jealousy, but this is what we call an anthropomorphism. It is using human illustrations to try to convey that God's attitude is that he wants us to worship and believe and have faith in him alone and not other gods. And the reason for that is because there are no other gods. Okay? So when he says, I am a jealous God, what they are attempting to do is to take an idiomatic expression and literalize it.
Yeah, exactly that. And all that to say at the end that when guys like Floyd attempt to tell Christians that their interpretation of a passage is wrong, it's still proving utterly futile on his part. Because even if he was right with his interpretation, what's the end all with the atheist worldview? I mean, there's no ultimate consequence for continuing to believe in this in the opposite position. You're not going to go to hell for it. You're not going to.
Do you know what it is? Do you know what motivates a lot of these people? Do you know what motivates a lot of these people, Veckel? Okay.
Oh, pride? Besides pride?
Well, I'm talking about people like Floyd and others who have this vendetta against the things of the Bible and Christians. And I don't want to do a psychoanalysis here, but I've encountered this, that many of these people have had experiences with relatives, friends, and loved ones who were committed Bible-believing Christians. And in some way that rubbed them really the wrong way. Okay? And they developed this resentment toward their relatives or family members who were committed Christians or Bible-believing Christians. And so they decided in their mind, okay, fine, and that they're going to make it their goal to undermine people's confidence. Look, if they really didn't believe the Bible, look, I don't think any of the crap coming out of Scientology is true. But you don't hear me obsessing about it, right? If they really believed that the Bible was a fairy tale, why not eat, live, and be merry, for tomorrow we die? Why are they so evangelistic in trying to undermine people's belief in what they consider to be a fairy tale?
Yeah, Matt Dillahunty, Jacqueline Glenn, The Amazing Atheist, Dusty Smith, Aaron Ross.
Well, at least you got to give.
These are perfect examples.
At least you got to give Matt Dillahunty credit. At least he tries to put an intellectual face on it. The amazing atheist, from what little I've seen, is dumber than a bag of rocks.
Yeah, it's just astounding to me. There's an individual that I work with here who spends a great deal of time when he's not working going around telling people how false the Bible is. I'm like, why why is that even an issue with you? I mean, people are just looking at him like, okay, and he's like randomly walking up to people, starting conversations like this with people who don't even care about the issue. But yeah,
okay, well, here's what you do.
Conversation.
Here's what you do, Veckel. Try to have a conversation with him that is non-confrontational or non-rebuttal, and just talk with him about his personality, his background. I said, I will almost guarantee you there is somebody in his background, his family, who are committed Bible believers, right? And he holds resentment for that. And this is his way at getting back indirectly. He's getting back at the people who believe in the Bible.
Yeah, a friend of mine, another coworker and myself, came up to the same conclusion. But go ahead.
I was done. By the way, Antonio, when you start a room, did you put any tags in, like atheism, theism, Bible, religion, debate?
I never do. I need to start doing that. I actually hadn't thought of that before.
It's really easy. All you got to do is you type in atheism, you hit return, then you type theism, hit return, God, hit return, religion, return, debate, return, Bible, return.
Yeah, I know how to put tags and stuff. I just haven't done it in a hangout.
Yeah, well, it takes you less than 60 seconds to do that. You can even
put
do
Ted
it
the
now.
Atheist name in there too.
Oh yeah, I'll definitely do that right now.
Well, yeah, if you want, just put in as the title. Change the title for "Where in the World is Ted the Atheist?"
Well, real quick.
Yeah, I want some of Ted too.
Instead of "Where in the world is Waldo?" Where in the world is Ted the Atheist?
Well, real quick, I'm gonna just make a policy here when I have hangouts. For those of you listening on and outside in chat, I have a real pet peeve with people who come in and talk crap, but don't want to come in and have a conversation. When you come to my hangouts, if you are absolutely like paranoid that you won't be treated unfairly, what I will do is I will unbroadcast people and then let you talk the entire, however long you need to talk.
But what you need to do is say you have 2 minutes of unfettered time. Don't give them unlimited amount of time. You can even give them 3 or 4 minutes.
I wasn't talking about unlimited. I wasn't. We don't want to get ridiculous with it. Obviously.
No sermons, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, because we know. I mean, I know I can be long-winded at times. I don't mean to be, but you see, this is the name of the game with a lot of skeptics. They just filibuster.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, they are doing that, huh?
Yeah, what I was about to say was, I think what Didi said makes a lot of sense. You get like, I don't know, 2 to 4 minutes to talk, uninterrupted. If you are absolutely that paranoid about being interrupted, then whoever you're talking directly to will be on broadcast. And then afterwards, we can continue the exchange that way. But here's what I'm not going to have. I'm not going to have people coming into my chat and talking a bunch of mess but don't want to come in. Because that just shows that you're not here to have a conversation. You're just here to criticize. You're here to get ticked off. When you know you have an issue with certain people, you're here to get ticked off on purpose just to have something to complain about.
Okay. Yeah, Antonio, when you set up your own room, just like when I do, there's no negotiating with people who come in. They either do it the way you say it, or you hide them from the broadcast, or you kick them. You'll notice yesterday when you gave me mod powers, all right? I tried as much as possible not to interject on Hogtie, right? But he wanted to interrupt me, and he kept on doing it. And I finally said to him, hey, listen, you're going to stop doing this. You do it again, and you're going to be hit from the broadcast. And he kept on doing it. Boom. He got hit from the broadcast. That's the only way to deal with these people.
Yeah.
No negotiation.
Yeah, I get that. What I'm saying is I'm just talking about like people who come into my chat, like who's on the outside chat. You know, they want to criticize everything that's going on in the room, and they want to talk about people in the room, but they don't want to come in. The way I see it is, if you got an issue with how people conduct themselves, then don't come to my chat. I'd rather you not be in my chat talking crap, because you're not here to see a discussion. You're not here to contribute anything. You're here to try to see about people you disagree with on how they're going to conduct themselves, and then when you don't like something, you're going to complain about it. You know what happens with people who I don't think run rooms very well? I don't watch them. I don't come in their chat and talk nonsense. Like there's certain people here on G Plus to where I just don't like how they run their hangouts, but I don't come to their rooms and talk crap in their chat. I just don't watch them. Simple as that. These people want to come in here and have endless problems with people, but they want to keep watching our hangouts. They want to keep flooding our chat and spamming the chats. It's not going to be a negotiation with this. If you really have an issue, then you need to be a man and come in here and talk. We can talk like men. We can talk like adults. But when I have people messing around talking stupid in my chat, and they don't want to deal with those issues directly. If you don't like how I run my hangout, then don't watch it. It's point blank. But I will not have people in my chat just talking trash and flooding it. That's not what my channel is going to be about.
Oh no, Jake P just showed up in the YouTube chat.
Okay, I know Jake.
Yeah, you notice when there are hangouts where crap isn't going to be tolerated, endless filibustering, hyena attacks, the atheists like to congregate in rooms where they can employ their hyena attacks and gangbanging. They're less likely to come into a room like this where they're going to actually have to comport themselves as an adult. This is why I consider most atheists that I deal with are what I like to call man-childs. They're children trapped in a man's body.
Oh yeah, I know quite a few of them I can name offhand. JJ, excuse me. Oh. Yeah, I said it. I said it.
Antonio, you need to give me mod powers in the YouTube.
Yeah, you gotta type it. You gotta type in a comment or something.
Okay,
I'll be right back, guys.
All right, man.
Give me mod powers because we already have somebody who's a known stalker and troller, and we're gonna remove them.
All right, I see your comment here. I'm going to make you a moderator. And you're definitely free to get rid of whoever you think you should get rid of, because I'm not going to have this on my channel. People aren't going to be, that's a real pet peeve of mine, when people come to my channel and just endlessly criticize people in the room, but they don't want to come approach us like adults, like men. Because here's the bottom line. Most of these people watching these hangouts are men. And I was cut from a different cloth. I was raised a certain way by my father. Like, if you have a problem with a man, you come deal with them like a man.
Okay, yeah.
I have a real big problem with people who
we have somebody coming in. Okay, phony beetle maniac says he will come in. Good.
Okay, yeah. Because people need to start acting like men. If they're going to be on the net, act like a man. Men don't sit up here and hide behind screens and like sling mud and whatnot. Men meet people like men face to face. Treated fairly. I respect people who conduct themselves like men. I have a real issue with these spineless cowards who just want to sling mud from the outside, but they don't want to have their feet put to the fire. Like front to front confrontation. And I'm not just talking about just me just controlling your voice or nothing like that, because that's not going to happen in my room. I'm a very fair person, but at the same time, I consider myself a person that won't take nonsense either. So if you really got a legit case to make, then you need to come in here. And so if Gary wants to come in here, then he's going to have to send me a message or hit me up on G+, and then I'll send him the link. But we're not going to be having this crap in my room. This is going to stop tonight. If I think you don't need to be in my chat, or if someone who's a moderator on my channel doesn't think you need to be in our chat, then you will be removed, point blank.
Okay, Antonio, phony Beetlemania CXS wants an invite. Let me get his nick
knows
here.
what he can do. You can send me a message or hit me up on G+. Yeah, but I know Phony Beetle. I've had a few conversations with him.
Yeah, well, this photo beetle guy has he's posted a number of videos to his YouTube, so I think it would be, I think, a fair assumption that you could give him the link.
Yeah, I've actually spoken to him directly many times. I know who he is, so
okay,
I'm not
so
worried about anything.
Right,
yeah,
it's not just a
like that.
it's not a fake account. Yeah, let him come in.
He's not going to do anything like that. And like I said,
yeah, well, because so many of the atheists are gutless wonders. They want to come in a room where they can walk all over you. But when they have somebody like you or Veckel or me who can defend ourselves intellectually, they're few and far between.
Yeah, I just get really tired of this. I just want to do something new here on G+. Like people need to start acting like men. They need to start acting like adults.
Multiple personality would like the link.
Yeah, multiple's cool. I have a high respect for him. Yeah, multiple's cool. Phony Beetle, even though I disagree with him on certain things, he's definitely not a troll. I will say that much. So there are definitely certain people out there.
Difficult to talk with at times, but he's not. I would say definitely let him in.
All right, so yeah, I'm gonna get multiple in here. All right, so I just got a message from Phony Beetle, and I'm gonna send him the link. And once you get this link, don't give it to anybody else. And see, there's him, and I'm going to add multiple into the room too. So let's see. Okay.
Okay, Phony Beetle Maniac XS is still requesting the link through G+.
Yeah, I just sent it to him.
Okay, all right.
And let's see here. I just added multiple personality too.
Okay. So.
And yes, you will. Like I said, I'm going to hold up my bargain. You will be treated fairly in here. I don't think I've ever treated you unfairly at all, but I mean, just to put that out there for the benefit of people watching.
No, it's just that other people are more dominant personalities and they try to take over people. But anyway, I was taking a little bit of a break from the whole Great Debate community stuff because I've not been liking my own behaviour. But I thought I'd come in because I think faith's important in Christianity. The thing is that with the atheists, it depends on the atheist, because some of them have quote unquote faith in science, if you want to call it that. Maybe it's just a very high valuable trust or very high value on the methodology. So it depends on the atheist. It depends on how they like to do things. I don't think it really matters, though. I don't think that faith is necessarily a bad thing. I don't think it's a bad thing. I enjoy the fact that I have faith in things. It doesn't make me a bad person. So what's wrong with having faith?
Well, there's nothing wrong with faith at all. The issue is when atheists make these accusations that, the Christian faith is just simply blind. Like we literally don't think at all. Like we just, it's basically like some sort of Barney the dinosaur type faith. It's not really anything meaningful, and we don't
not all atheists
reason or anything like that. I'm not saying all atheists do that, but quite a few of them do.
Right, but criticize those particular atheists for doing that. Don't criticize all of them, because
who said all of them did it? There's no reason for you to say, "Well, I'm saying all of them," and I never said all of them.
No, it's just that. D.D. Dawkins here used the term "the atheist." Now, I'm sorry, that is bigoted. Because as soon as you say what you mean is the particular group. Because again, no atheists are the same, no Christians are the same, no Muslims are the same, no Jews are the same.
Well, hold on. That makes no sense.
Antonio, hold on a second.
Wait, hold on.
I'm going to give you a textbook example of how to dismantle this in 60 seconds.
Right. Just hold that thought for a second.
Sure. Okay. Sure. It's your round. Go ahead.
I have a big problem with people who saying, like, when you say the atheist, that you must be generalizing all people. That's just like saying you've had conversations with a lot of atheists. You said I've had good conversations with the atheists. Therefore, you are saying that all atheists have good conversations. Why is it only when a negative thing is being put out, it's generalizing? But when you're saying good things, it must mean that all atheists are having good conversations. When it's something good, it's not a generalization. But when it's something negative, it is a generalization. I don't buy that at all.
Right. The problem is that I personally do not say that all atheists do X or do Y.
Where did you hear me? Where did you hear me say all atheists X, Y, Z?
No. I heard you say this term, and you'll forgive me if I. Sorry to interrupt you. By the way, you said the atheist. Now, when you say the something, you mean the entire group, because like it's like saying, well, the blacks do this, or the Irish do this. You see how it's bigoted. It's basically it's group generalization.
You do know that sometimes someone can generalize. Now, you said it's bigoted. Why is bigotry a problem?
Do you want me to get into that? Because we're all individuals, and therefore you can't judge a group by how a person or even a subgroup of that group acts.
Why can't I? Wait, hold on a second, Antonio. Hold on a second. Why can't I?
Why can't you? Because it reflects badly on you. Because it shows you.
What do I care if it reflects badly on me?
Because aren't they human beings? Shouldn't you want a?
Well, you said I can't do it. You said I can't do it.
No, you can't. Because you should try to.
No, I can do it because obviously I can do it because according to you, I committed a verbal act of bigotry, so I could do it, and I did do it according to you.
Yeah, because you don't see the idea that bigotry is wrong, but it is. Because again,
what could you tell me? What is your baseline standard for what is right in order to determine what is wrong?
I'm a Christian, so my baseline is Jesus.
Okay, so how is me giving a generalization about how atheists behave in my experience? How is that wrong?
Jesus said it was wrong.
Show me where?
Sure. Do you have a Bible on you?
I'm waiting.
No, I'm asking, do you have a Bible on you?
Yeah, I have a computer. I have my Bible on the computer.
You have it on the computer. You don't actually possess it in actual text.
You know, let's not listen. Let's not prolong this. Where did Jesus say generalizing? Did Jesus say beware of the leaven of the Pharisees?
Yeah, he did. But he also said,
does that mean did that statement? Listen, I'd appreciate you wouldn't interrupt me in the middle of a sentence.
Sorry, I do apologize.
Okay, Jesus generalized about the Pharisees and Sadducees. Does that mean that every single Pharisee was guilty of his indictment? No, it doesn't. So sometimes generalizing is perfectly appropriate. Now, if you understood me to say that every single atheist that exists, that holds the atheism, behaves in this way, I don't think an average person would come away with that. We're talking here about the atheists that I and Antonio encounter. Hold on a second, I have a phone call.
Yeah, and as I said, if I were to say, well, I've had good conversations with the evolutionists here on YouTube, you wouldn't hear somebody like say, well, who are you to generalize all evolutionists here on YouTube? You wouldn't hear that.
Yes, you would.
No, you would not. No, you would not, man. Be honest.
Yes, because generalization is positive or negative. Because everybody in that group is not going to be like that.
Come on, dude. You don't ever hear that when it's like a positive thing. Like when you're talking about being, positive with people like atheists or evolutionists. You don't hear that, sir. Come on. No, you do not.
You do because again, most atheists will admit to you that not everybody who's in that group is a good or moral person, or is even a good person to have a conversation with. Right?
No, I'm just saying that.
Do two honest ones, right?
Generally, you have a positive thing to say about a group of individuals. They don't get generalized. Like I'll say something like, I've had good conversations with white people. Like that doesn't mean that I'm saying that all white people are not racist.
Right. But the point there is that's from your experience. You say you're giving a caveat to it. You say the people I've conversations with aren't racist, which is good. That shows you that we're moving in the right direction. The point that I'm trying to get to DD, and maybe he'll have to do that if he cast it in the atheist I discussed online, even if he put it like that, like it was to say the atheists I discussed online act like this, then at least he's cast it in the atheists out there who may not behave like that. Do you understand the difference? Because then you're giving people who won't act, who don't or won't act like that.
Well, I think it's quite clear. Oh, so I'm sorry, man. Go ahead and finish.
No, I'm just saying, like, it's like saying, all right, it's like saying, for example, all people with left hands aren't good at baseball, but there are some good left-handed people who play baseball. One's a generalistic statement about a entire group of people, and one's a acknowledgement there are left-handed people who play the sport to a reasonable degree. Okay, I'm trying to get to a point that DD needs to understand that he can't just be dismissive of all people of a certain group, and then using the word like the atheist is bigoted, as much as he may not think it is. It is. Like if I was to say the blacks, would that be bigoted? Yes. If I was to say the Christians, would that be bigoted? Yes. Because
all right, I'm back.
Okay, I'm trying to make the point, DD, that if you cast it in terms of the atheists I've dealt with online or the atheists I've had conversations with, then that would be less generalistic and less bigoted.
Okay, was Paul bigoted when he said all Cretans are liars?
For God's sake.
I think it was quite obvious.
Hold on a second. Antonio, hold on a second. Hold on. I asked him a question. Paul said all Cretans are liars. Was he bigoted?
He was. No, I don't have time to discuss what Paul was actually discussing.
Paul said no. Paul said all Cretans are liars. Was he being bigoted?
He was talking about from his personal experience. He wasn't saying it as actual law, was he?
Okay. Did he say all Cretans are liars? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay,
And that
good.
was bigoted, by the way.
It was bigoted. You do know that was written under the inspiration of God, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't. You see,
So guys,
your opinion of
I
Paul
guess you're not aware.
So
I
guys,
guess you're not. I guess you're
right?
not. I guess you're not aware of the first principle of hermeneutics when it comes to principles of interpretation, whether it's a text or conversation, that all statements need to be understood within their given context. So when we're generalizing about atheists, we're not going to. Okay, then we're talking about a particular domain, and that is what we are personally experiencing.
So
Now, I'm not the least bit troubled that you have concluded that I'm being bigoted when I give a generalization about how the atheists behave in general in my experience. If you want to think it's bigoted, be my guest. I really don't care.
I think when most people have general conversation about talking about a group of people, they're generally talking about in their experience. They aren't necessarily putting everybody into the same boat. I don't know. We've gotten to a point in our culture today to where we got to qualify every single thing.
Right.
We got to qualify every little single thing because people don't use basic.
Yeah. So let's just move on. Let's just move on from this trivial discussion because it's really of no importance.
Yeah, it really isn't, man.
Yeah.
Just so you know, I'm not talking about all atheists, and neither is DD. But we're moving on. You got something else you want to talk about?
Well, let me ask you this, Gary. Do you believe that there are any sincere atheists?
Yes.
Okay, good. How do you handle that? That statement you just made is contradicted by Romans 1 that says they are suppressing the truth and unrighteousness.
He's talking about the people at the time. He's not talking about people.
No, he's not. Romans 1 is making universal declarations.
Hey, Dee, let him finish. Go ahead.
Right, Romans 1 was written, I believe, in the 1st century AD, when the Roman Church was first being put up. Now, the thing is, because it's so close when Jesus was around, that people could actually go and ask people from the area whether these things had actually taken place or not. They could actually go to somebody and say, "Oh, did you know Jesus? Yeah. Did he do this? Yes." Unfortunately, we're 2,000 years removed from that, where we can't do that. You see, that's what Paul was actually saying. He wasn't saying, no, when we're 2,000 years removed from it, and we've got a book which people believe or don't believe. And if there's other material.
Well, here's the problem. Okay, you're not going to go on and monologue. Here's the problem with what you're saying, is you're saying that Romans 1 was only localized within Paul's experience. The fact of the matter is, here's what he said. Starting in verse 18, for the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth and unrighteousness, because that which is known about God is evident within them, for God has made it evident to them. For ever since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made, so that they are without excuse. This is not a localized generalization of Roman culture. This is a global, if not universal, declaration of the hearts of men. Okay? So your claim that this is localized has been shown to be fallacious by what I've just read.
You Paul, sorry. So you're taking Paul to prove Paul. Very specious reasoning there. And
that's not what I did. That is not what I did. I didn't quote Paul to prove Paul. I simply read to you what Romans 1 says. Now, you told me you believe that there are some sincere atheists. Okay?
Hey, gentlemen,
Romans 1 says the reason why everybody is an atheist is because they suppress the truth and unrighteousness.
Hold on, Didi. I just said I have to step off for a quick minute, but I'll be back in like 2 minutes.
No problem. I'll watch the ship.
Yeah, you're in charge while I'm gone. I'll be back in a few minutes.
Right. But the point I'm trying to make is that, like, if somebody tells me that they don't believe in God, I have to believe them, because otherwise.
One second, please. Veckel, are you there?
Yep, it's me.
Okay, good. Just checking. Go ahead, Gary.
Sorry, I have to believe them because that's the way that real conversation takes place. I'm not going to believe that they're lying to me any more than they're going to believe that I'm lying to them. But being
Okay,
Christian.
who said they're lying to you? How about their practitioners of self-deception?
How do I know that?
Because God said what they were.
But the atheists say that we're delusional. Doesn't mean it's true.
I don't care what they say. What I care about is what God says.
Okay, I didn't see that. It was Paul.
Who's the final arbiter and determiner of the nature of reality, Gary?
God.
Okay, good. But, in this passage, it's a universal statement about the nature of all men.
No, it isn't. It's Paul talking about things at the time.
That's not a rebuttal. Gary, saying no, it isn't is not a rebuttal. Please support your accusation.
Oh, right. Paul was unlike Jesus. By the way, this hangout's probably going to go down in a minute.
Do you believe in the verbal, plenary, infallible, and inerrant inspiration of the Bible?
Do I believe the Bible's inerrant? No. Good. Can I say? Because again, the thing is, it's been translated in numerous languages. For a start, we don't have the originals. So for
error number one. But go ahead.
No, it's true. But the thing
that's an error. What you said.
How is it an error? Whereas
because that has nothing to do with the New Testament doctrine of the inspiration of the Bible.
Where's the original New Testament documents?
No, you're confusing you're confusing textual criticism with the origin of the autographs.
Yeah,
you don't even know what you're talking about.
Actually, I do. But
the question, no, you don't. Okay, let me ask you this question: the problem isn't that it has been translated over and over again, because you see, we have the original copies in Greek. So the problem isn't translation. You don't know what you're talking about.
Really, because I'd like to see those.
Okay, do you understand? Do you know what the autographs are?
Yes.
What are they?
Yeah, the original writings supposed of the Bible. The thing is, we need to do more study. No,
right.
I'm saying that we need more study. We need more study. For God's sake.
Okay, good. Now, you brought up the issue. Well, the Bible has been translated over and over again. That's a completely superfluous and moot point. The reason why is because we don't need to rely on the accuracy of translations, because we can go back to a plethora of Greek copies of the New Testament. So the point that you made about it's been translated over and over again is what we would call in debate a moot point. It's a superfluous point.
It isn't because again, the Greek themselves are transliterations.
Okay, Gary, did you understand what I just said?
Yes, and I'm telling you.
Okay, good. Wrong. Do you understand? Okay, you see, you're not. You see, the problem that we're having here is you're not comprehending my rebuttal. Now, I said to you, your accusation that we have to rely on many generations of translations is a completely superfluous point. It's meaningless because we don't have to rely on translation. A translation is when you translate from the original language into a receptor language. We don't have that problem because we have the most copies in the original Greek of any ancient manuscript of antiquity. So you mentioning translations after translations is not a problem at all.
Well, there is because there's error.
Oh my God, you are really dumb. Okay.
No, I'm not.
Do you understand the difference between? Do you understand the difference between a copy of a Greek manuscript of the New Testament versus a translation?
Right, a translation is if it comes into a new language. A copy is if it's translated to the original language. Right, and I'm saying
now, did you not say that we have a problem because the Bible has been translated so many times? Did you not say that?
Yes, But I'm saying that we.
Okay, good. That's not a problem, Gary.
Right, it is, and I'll explain why.
No, it is not a problem.
Wait, Didi.
Because
really
we can go back to a plethora of Greek manuscripts. We don't have to rely and trust that translate.
Wait, Didi,
Do you know anything about the Greek manuscript basis of the New Testament?
Wait, Didi.
Yes.
Hold on a second. I'm really curious to hear this from Gary. Why is that a problem? And what kind of problem is it?
Right. The problem is that the originals he's talking. There is no originals.
It doesn't matter. That doesn't matter.
I'll go into why it matters. Right, because there could be transcription errors, as in spelling mistakes.
Stop right there. You said it could be.
You said
How
it could
do
be,
you know
right?
that? How do you know that? That's conjecture.
Because there has been.
If we don't have the originals, then how do you form your basis that the copies do not highly reflect to a high degree what was in the originals? How do you know that?
Because they didn't have a copy machine, so transcription errors would occur.
It doesn't. That's not a problem. Do you know why?
Yes, it is. Because, all right.
No, I'll tell you why it's not a problem. I'll tell you, you see, you don't know what you are talking about when it comes to textual criticism. Here's why it's not a problem. It's because we have a plethora of Greek New Testament manuscripts. We have thousands and thousands and thousands with them. And when we compare variant with variant, you know that only less than 2% of the entire New Testament is even in question as to what was in the original. Are you aware of that? Can you give me one example? Can you give me? Hold on a second. I want to finish this off once and for all. Can you tell me what are some of the most common types of variants in Greek manuscripts? Could you tell me that, Gary? And could you also tell me, are they consequential?
I want to know how it's going to be a problem.
No. Let him answer this question, because he's commenting on textual criticism and why it's a big problem. Gary, tell me what some of the most common types of variants are, and then tell me why they're consequential.
Right. Let's get into this. Right.
I want an answer. Listen, stop right there. I'm a moderator in the room. I asked you a very clear and relevant question. I don't want to hear a response to something that I didn't ask. I'll repeat the question again, and then I'll shut up. And you can have a full 3 or 4 minutes. Okay? Now, here is the question. Can you tell me, since you are commenting on the nature of the reliability and the transmission of the text of the New Testament, can you tell me one or more of the most common types of variants that would be found from manuscript to manuscript, and tell me why those particular types of variants would be consequential?
Does Vaticanus and Sinaiticus, is that what you mean?
Why do I hear crinkling like somebody's eating?
Do you mean Vaticanus and Sinaiticus? Those are the 2 most earliest ones we have. Is that what you mean?
No. You're not answering my question. You are not answering my question. You are commenting on you are saying that we have big problems with doubt as to the bulk or majority of what the apostles actually wrote. I will ask the question again. Can you tell me one or more of what would be the common types of variants that would occur from manuscript to manuscripts, and then tell me why those common types of variants would be consequential?
Okay. If you look at Vaticanus, for example, the entire, I think it's the story of the prostitute being killed in the street, and Jesus saying, repent, he will not say past a stone, is missing out of it. Now there's people, and
you're not answering my question.
I just did ask you a question.
No, you didn't. What is a common? No, you didn't, because you see, you didn't even. You see, you do a little bit of reading and you think you're knowledgeable in this area, and you're not. And the reason why I'm being hard on you is because you don't know what you're talking about.
Actually,
what is a common type of variant in the New Testament? Can you tell me?
You want a variant? What do you mean, the reading, you mean?
What is a common type of variant that would occur?
You're asking stupid questions because, again, the variant's going to depend on what
then
reading you want.
you know, that's a question. That's a question that anybody who's familiar with textual criticism and the transmission of the copying of the New Testament could answer. Do you know the answer? What is give me one or two common types of variants that we would regularly find from manuscript to manuscript.
It depends which reading you follow, for a start.
Okay, Gary, one more time. I want you to tell me one or two types of the most common types of variants that are found among the various Greek manuscripts.
Maybe I'm not understanding the question. Right? Can you tell me what the
do you know what a variant is?
Yes, but maybe you can tell me
what is a variant. What is a variant, Gary?
It's something that's different in one manuscript to the next.
Okay, good. Can you tell me what are one or two of the most common types of variants that we have from manuscript to manuscript?
There have been one where one piece has been read as, I think it's in God in the Spirit to the Spirit of God. That has been mistranslated sometimes. That's one that I know about.
There's no mistranslation from Greek manuscript to Greek manuscript. There's no translation there. They're all in the same receptive language.
I said transcription, man. I said transcription.
Okay, good. Now, what are some of the most common types of variants?
As I said, love in the Spirit. There's one where I think it's John 13. I think it is, where the people disagree about whether the Greek for that is correct. There's some, again, I don't speak Greek, so I don't really know.
Okay, so you don't have the foggiest idea of what you're talking about.
Actually, I do, but never mind.
Yes,
I do.
No, you don't, because if you did, you're pontificating on the reliability of the New Testament text, and you can't even tell me what is one of the most common types of variants that we would find from Greek manuscript and Greek manuscript. You know what that tells me? What it tells me is you don't know what you're talking about.
What really?
Really?
Oh, really? Could you tell me which reading do you prefer?
Can I? It has nothing to do with what reading I prefer. What it does tell me is this:
what are the two readings?
I know a lot more about textual criticism and those issues, and you do not.
But
and you are speaking.
You have to be fair. He's asking you questions. So you can't just say, "I don't want to answer your questions." If you're going back and forth.
No, multiple. All right, hold on a second. Multiple. I am not going to give him the answer that anybody who has a basic 101 understanding of textual criticism and the textual transmission of the New Testament should know this answer. I'm not going to give him something that he should know. I'm not going to give him the opportunity. Multiple, please don't interrupt me. We're not going to have conversations like we did the last time. You'll get plenty of time to speak when I shut up. Okay? I'm not going to give him the opportunity to give him the answer, which is a cakewalk, to say, oh, yeah, I know what you were talking about. I just didn't know how to verbalize it that way. Okay? He doesn't know what he's talking about. He said the first thing out of his mouth was, when it came to the reliability of the New Testament, here is what he said. He says, we have translation after translation after translation after translation. That was a gargantuan error on his part. Anybody familiar with the basics of textual criticism would not have made such a blunder.
Well, can I just ask one question? Hold on, before you guys get into it, I just want to ask one question for the audience. I personally don't know what you guys really are talking about. I'm trying to get maybe a better understanding. I don't have it in front of me. Right. And the reason why I'm asking Edie for you to explain, since you seem to have this depth of knowledge, is so the audience can maybe follow along and understand why you guys are having this conflict. Just to say that you're not going to let him off the hook doesn't really help.
He's pointing out.
So that's what I'm trying to say.
All right.
And please,
I'll make it clear to the audience. I already did make it clear, but I'll make it even clearer anymore. He is attempting to cast doubt and skepticism that we have a reliable text today, either in the form of the Greek manuscripts or in their current representation of English translations.
We don't have any Greek manuscripts. The only manuscripts we have are Vatican, Sinaiticus, and their copy.
Oh my God, Gary, you listen to me. You see, this is why I lose my patience. This is why I lose my patience with people like you. You come into these rooms and you speak as though you have some education. You don't have the foggiest idea of what you're talking about.
This is what I have.
You know,
so,
Gary,
yeah,
we have the New Testament Greek manuscripts, the copies that we have from the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd and onward centuries for the first.
We don't have any for the first.
We do have some small fragments from the 1st century. We have more extant copies.
We do.
We have more. Okay, if you keep on interrupting me, I'm going to hide you from the broadcast. We have more extant copies of the Greek New Testament than any other document from antiquity. And we have, within those New Testament manuscripts, we have manuscripts that are closer to the original writings when they were originally penned than any other document of antiquity. Okay? Gary simply does not know what he's talking about.
I do, because I know who wrote it.
Aspersion. Okay. Okay. This is the problem when you talk with people who are stupid. On
Bro Joe, can you mute Bro Joe, because I can't. It's hard to hear.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know my mic.
Okay, when you take somebody who's read some quack stuff about the Bible, then they come on to places like this. Apparently. They haven't read any scholarly work on textual criticism, and then they proceed to pontificate on here. Now you're getting really irritating because you're doubling down on your ignorance that you displayed earlier about textual criticism.
Oh God, you're going to educate me about textual criticism. You do realize, Doc, is my educational background is in textual criticism. So don't feed me that crap.
Well, really, what is your degree? What is your degree?
English. So I have a degree.
Wait. What's that got to do with textual criticism? Regarding
Gary, my patience is growing. My patience is going thin with you because now you're telling me you have an education in textual criticism, and you said the number one problem with the reliability of the Bible today is because it's been translated so many times. Somebody who actually had even a BA degree in New Testament would never have made such a blunder.
Hey guys, I'll just let you know I've been away for a bit trying to figure out what's going on with my internet connection, and I just got back, so I'm not really privy as to what's happening here.
No,
something about textual criticism
is getting so bad. My head.
Yeah, I'm stupid, Dawkins. Yeah, I'm stupid.
You are stupid. And I will say willfully, maybe you weren't born that way. Maybe you don't have a frontal lobe injury, but you are, by your own choice, you are coming on here, you are pontificating about the reliability of the New Testament.
You don't even know what.
And then you tell me you've had an education. You told me you had an education. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Let me ask you this question. Mm-hmm. What two names are most famous when it comes to collating Greek manuscripts in terms of a manuscript basis that is used for most contemporary English translations these days? Do you know what their names are? They're the names of two men.
Yes.
And anybody, what would that be?
Nessel
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Wrong.
Yes.
No. It's Westcott. It's Westcott and Hort.
Westcott and Hort was
we're talking about okay, that's right. And many of our modern translations are revisions of that as well.
It's 2016. The
bottom line is that you said that the problem is that it's been translated so many times.
It has.
We can go back to the copies of the Greek even before there were translations. So the number one problem that you cited is not a problem.
Right, but the problem is that the Nessel Island, which is the most recent, which if you knew
the Nessel Island is the most recent, but many contemporary. When I say contemporary, I mean within the last 200 years.
Yeah, but you think that that's got a whole,
the Nessel Island is the most recent. But if you had actually studied textual criticism, you would have said the names Westcott and Hort, not Nessel Island,
because they're the most recent. You said the most recent, didn't you?
No, that's not what I said.
Yes, you
I
did.
didn't ask you for the most recent. I said, what is the manuscript basis that underlines the most of the modern versions? And I'm referring to the versions within the last 100 to 200 years. Okay?
Which is the Nessel Island.
The Nessel Island is only recent within the last number of decades. Okay, you know what? I can't take this stupidity much longer because you don't know what you're talking about.
Yes, I do. The Westcott Hort was from the 18th century, which is not from the last 100
okay. And do you
years.
understand that the American Standard and the Revised Standard relied on the manuscript basis from Westcott and Hort? Do you understand that?
Yes.
Oh, okay, good. And do you understand that the New American Standard, which is a major contemporary translation,
but there's problems
was
with
based off of that? Yeah. So the bottom line here is this: could you tell me any New Testament doctrine that is undermined because of any variant?
Yes, because if you follow an Alexandrian only position, there's many things that the Byzantine manuscript doesn't talk about.
No, okay? Obviously, you didn't understand the question.
No, I answered it.
If we were to remove the less than 2% of consequential variance,
there's more than that.
It would not prevent any central or major Christian doctrine from being established whatsoever.
No, I never said it did. I'm just saying that there are.
Okay, good. Then they are inconsequential.
They're not.
You understand the difference between consequential and inconsequential?
Right. The majority text, for example, differs from the majority text in numerous places, and the majority text is important.
That's not a problem.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not a problem.
Yes, it is.
Okay, do you understand that there are over 100,000 textual variants between the manuscripts?
Yes.
There are more textual variants.
About 400,000.
There are more. Okay, good. I said there were over 100,000. There are more textual variants than there are actual verses in the New Testament. But you understand that is meaningless. Do you know why? It's because 98% of all of the variants are not under question, because all they are spelling differences and word order differences. One Greek New Testament scholar.
Amen.
Okay, one, his name is Daniel Wallace, who is a widely renowned New Testament Greek scholar, an expert in the New Testament. Okay, Dan Wallace said that there are some verses that you could rearrange them and have them translate the same way in the English. You could translate them into many multiples of dozens of different ways, and yet they will always come out in the English, because that's the nature of Greek. So the fact is, you could have multiple variants where there are slight word order differences due to scribal errors, but it doesn't change what the intrinsic and inherent meaning of the Greek is. So the overwhelming majority of the textual variants are literally meaningless. They are completely inconsequential as to what was actually written.
They're not inconsequential, but never mind.
Okay?
They're not inconsequential, but again, I'm sick of arguing with you because.
Okay, you know what? I've had enough.
Wait.
No, I've had enough of him, because this guy is doubling and tripling down on his own ignorance. And when he was corrected numerous times,
what just happened? I was away. I just got.
I removed him. I'm fed up with his stupidity, and what he's done now is he calls me a bigot because I generalized how atheists behave in my experience at Google+. Then he attacks the New Testament, and when I question him, he says that the biggest problem in New Testament reliability is because it's been translated over and over and over. He says it's been translated so many times that it's unreliable. And I pointed out to him that the Greek manuscript basis that we have, all of them predate translations, except of course if you want to include, let's say, the Vulgate. And then he lies and he says that he actually is credentialed or has a degree in textual criticism. He was lying through his teeth. And I asked him, what is the most common type of textual variant? Any first-year Bible student could tell you that it would be a word order difference or a spelling difference.
And what did he say his degree was in textual criticism?
Say that again?
Wait, what? Hold on. He said English?
Yeah.
I said, what is your degree in? He goes, English. But he told me, how can your degree be in English? No, people who have degrees in textual criticism major in Greek and New Testament studies.
That's what I'm saying.
Take a look at any Greek. Take a look at any Greek scholar. Okay, they have a PhD in New Testament. They are not only experts in the Koine first century Greek, but they're experts in the New Testament itself. Okay.
Yeah.
Take for example Bart Ehrman. Okay, Bart Ehrman has a PhD in that respective area. Now he's a harsh critic. He casts doubt on the reliability of the New Testament, but he's credentialed in the New Testament and Greek.
Right.
So once somebody starts lying to me, then I lose my patience. He was clearly lying and he was BSing us. And then he has the nerve to call me a bigot.
Yeah, I missed most stuff. I just got back and I just saw somebody get kicked when I got back. I was just like, whoa, what happened?
Trust me. Once you start lying and then you double down on your lies, then you don't deserve to be in here. Now, I'm not saying he was lying because he was merely disagreeing with me. He was clearly lying.
But if you say his degree is in English and he's talking about textual criticism, that's sad.
Yeah, right.
There's no connection.
That is off a little bit. I think that's off. Yeah.
Listen, I don't have a problem with somebody saying, I don't agree with you, but I'm not an expert in these areas. Okay, fine. But the moment he started lying, I mean, I asked him the question, what are the two biggest names in modern translation? And he didn't even know Westcott and Hort. And he mentioned the Nestle-Aland text, which is a revision of the Westcott and Hort.
Well, I think just to be fair, he did say that Westcott and that I think the two names that you had mentioned, I'm not sure what those names were.
Right, and by the time he mentioned it, he had an opportunity to Google it. Do you think these people who shoot their mouth off don't Google stuff? He was clearly lying. It's one thing for somebody to be strongly opinionated and to be sincere, but when they're lying, he actually said he had a degree in textual criticism. That was a lie.
I thought he said he had a degree in English. What did he say? Textual criticism?
Well, that's what he said afterwards.
Wait a minute. So you asked him?
Yeah, he asked him for his credentials, and then all he said was English.
Right. Yeah.
And then both Dawkins and I laughed because it had nothing to do with
the
these.
Like, Dawkins, don't talk to me like that. I have a degree in textual criticism.
Oh, so wait a minute. So he specifically said he had a degree in textual criticism.
Yep.
No. He asked him what his credentials were, and then he said English, and that was it.
No, I said to him, do you have any? I said, do you have a degree or education and in textual criticism? And he said yes. I said, good. What is your formal degree?
That's right.
Oh, so you asked him, what is his education in textual criticism?
What educational background do you have
regarding textual criticism?
I said, I said, are you degreed or credentialed in the area of textual criticism? He said, yes. I said, good. What's your degree? He goes, in English.
Right, because at first he basically goes, yeah. He's like, I got my degree in this. And Doctor says, really, where? And he froze up for a second.
So I understand this and get this straight. You asked him what is his degree or background or whatever, in specifically textual criticism, and his response to that was English.
No, I'll repeat it again. I said, do you have any educational background or are you credentialed in the area of textual criticism? Because he kept on telling me he knew what he was talking about. Now, I'm not one who maintains that I have a degree in textual criticism, but I obviously knew more about the issue than he did.
Right. So you asked him for his background, or if he has a background or some sort of education in textual criticism, and then he said he did, and you asked him what that was, and he said
I asked him what the specific degree that he obtained, that he said he was credentialed in the field of textual criticism. And I said, what's your specific degree? He says English.
So the specific degree you asked him about in the field of textual criticism, and his answer was English.
That's correct.
Wow.
Yeah. That
was dishonesty.
Okay. All right. I don't even know what to say to that.
Hold on a second. I'll be right with you. Multiple personalities trying to get back in. Hold on, let me just see.
No, I just got back. I was like,
okay. All right.
Then I don't know what happened.
Sometimes it's
yeah, that's yeah, no glitch there.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely no snipers in this room.
Yeah, this is what is so frustrating is people who pontificate and they really don't know what they're talking about. They've maybe read one attack book on the Bible and they think they know what they're talking about.
Right. And that's why I'm getting ready to start studying textual criticism and stuff like that.
Oh, you getting into textual criticism, man?
Yeah.
And just to let you know is many, if not most variants are very easy to decipher and discern how they came about by looking at the text. So the point is this is we can say or Bible scholars can say with about 98% certainty, we know what precisely was in the New Testament. The rest of the 2% that raises a question, none of those, the remaining 2% of the variants are consequential.
A quick question.
I heard Bart Ehrman destroyed James White in the debate over the Bible misquote Jesus.
Say that again.
Bart Ehrman destroyed James White? I don't think so. Not a chance.
No. If you listen to Bart Ehrman, even though he is credentialed and he did study under Bruce Metzger, I will not disparage his education. But when you listen to him in debates, it's pretty clear, at least from my point of view, that he is motivated more out of emotion than scholarship.
Yeah. Well, right, because Matt Bell said, well, James White had no position or had no place to even go up there and debate the leading New Testament scholar or whatever.
Bart Ehrman is not the leading. Bart Ehrman is not the leading New Testament scholar. Is he a New Testament scholar? Yes, he is. Is he the leading New Testament scholar? No.
Right, and isn't part of James White field textual criticism?
He's not credentialed in that as far as I know, but he is extremely well studied in that area.
Hey, quick question. You guys know this guy Reza Aslan? He said he went on Fox News and said that he was credentialed in both the Old and New Testament. Do you guys know that that was actually a lie? He actually lied about his credentials in both.
Reza is a phony.
Wait a minute. So he just outright lied and said he had degrees or at least a degree, and it was found that it
Yeah,
was just a total lie.
let me tell you something. There was a guy on
Tell him,
Pal Talk. There was a guy on Pal Talk. I'm sorry. Did I interrupt you multiple?
Yeah. No, I don't know if I was going to explain about Reza Aslam, but I don't know if I'm.
No.
that's what Antonio was talking about.
If I interrupted you, go ahead.
Yeah,
Well-
just hold your thought, DD, and I want to know about this Reza Aslan character.
Sure.
Reza Aslam he's a Muslim scholar supposedly, and he went on Fox News. He wrote a couple of books about the life. I think one is called "The Life and Times of Jesus Christ," something of that nature. And he was promoting the book, so he went on Fox News, and the anchor on Fox News, who was Christian, she asked him, even though that really doesn't matter, she had asked him, she said, oh, well, why would a Muslim author, why would someone who believes in Islam want to write a book on the life and times of Jesus? So he was saying that as an academic, this was his job. And he said that he has degrees, advanced degrees in both the Old and New Testament and this, and, he's done extensive work. But when people looked into it, he has a PhD in creative writing. He has no formal training. I think he does have a master's degree in theology generally, but not in the Old and New Testament. He doesn't have advanced degrees in those. So he was found out to be a fraud when he was talking about his degrees. But he's constantly on CNN, Fox News, and if you Google his name, you'll see he's found out to be a fraud.
Yeah, he's a joke. Yeah, there was a similar guy on Pal Talk. There was a similar guy. I'm trying to remember what his name is. He tried to present himself as a Unitarian, but he clearly was a Muslim, and he claimed that he was credentialed in New Testament studies. Well, we found out who he actually was, and it turns out, upon questioning him about his degrees, he said I think he said he had either a master's or a PhD in theology. And when I went online under his real name, that we were able to find it. By the way, he was not doc dropped, okay? But people knew who he actually was. We went onto his actual website under his real name, and then when I questioned him without giving out personal information, he had to admit that his so-called master's degree in theology was just a mail order course from some Roman Catholic institution.
You've got to be kidding me.
No, I'm not kidding you. So, people make up crap all the time.
Wow, man. This
was a Muslim attack dog on Pal Talk attacking the New Testament.
Smells like that good old-fashioned taquilla.
Not good, man. Not good.
See, that when the guy first said when Gary first said out of his mouth that the Bible is unreliable because it has been translated and translated and translated so many times, bingo! Any Bible scholar would just sit there and laugh. No Bible scholar would make such an elementary mistake, and it was not a slip of the tongue. A translation is when you take an original language and you bring it into a receptor language. A copy from one language into the same language is not a translation.
It's interesting. A lot of times, I was in the chat the other day in one of these hangouts, and there were like a whole bunch of there was a couple of atheists who were criticizing the Bible, and I remember my mom was listening to the conversation. She was like, I bet you most of the people who are doing all this criticism haven't even read it all the way through. And I was like, you know what? It's interesting because me as an agnostic, me who has not been convinced either way, I must admit I've read the Bible, but I haven't read it all the way through and tried to take an actual experience in trying to learn the text, learn the document, understand what it really means. So that's what I'm actually in the process of doing. And I will say this, it's been an eye-opening experience, especially trying to understand different translations and different perspectives on what certain things mean. And I'm very early in the book. I'm still in Exodus actually, but I'm trying to just get through it with work. But are there any resources that you guys would be able to point me to that would help me? That would be as kind of like a guide through it, so I can maybe read that and while I'm reading the Bible to help me get better perspective on it.
You might want to go to a Christian bookstore and buy a good study Bible. They have opening chapters for summaries and important information about the history and the background of the book that you're reading. And then there are not entirely, but major verse-by-verse footnotes at the bottom that will highlight relevant things in terms of archaeology, history, Hebrew or Greek translation issues. One of my favorites is something called the Ryrie Study Bible. Okay. Charles Ryrie was a renowned Bible scholar from Dallas Theological Seminary. Now there are other study Bibles that you might want to pick up, but that's one of my favorites.
Yeah, Nelson's illustrated. Oh, he's gone. Oh, there he is. All right.
I'm sorry. This
I think
thing
this.
out again.
Yeah, there's a book that I have called Nelson's Illustrated Dictionary or something like that. I'm not at home right now in front of it, but it's a pretty thick book from A to Z. It talks about all the, it's a dictionary of all the names of people in the Bible, places in the Bible, and even doctrines. And then there's some images as well.
Yeah,
that's a good material that I often look to as well.
Now here's the deal
with apps. Now you can probably download all this stuff.
Here's the deal. When it comes to most atheists' attack upon the Bible, with some exceptions, they're grotesquely sloppy in their handling of the text. They just simply go to these alleged Bible contradiction sites. They don't do any of their own primary research into the Greek or Hebrew. They don't even have an understanding of basic concepts in translation and genre. Let me give you an example.
Hey, yo, boys, evilbible.com.
Oh yeah, that's my favorite. I love going to that site.
But you know what? Even evilbible.com, they have a good piece on why atheism is not a lack of belief. He trashes that in that.
Oh really?
So,
okay.
Yeah, you should read that. He rips them to shreds.
Very interesting.
But the fact of the matter is, they're not interested in being charitable. Okay, they're just looking to do gotcha findings. But like, for example, some guy brought up yesterday. He said, "Oh, the Bible's filled with contradictions." I said, "Okay, give me one." And he goes, "Well, who motivated David to number the troops?
Oh no, not that one.
Was it God or Satan?" And I said to him, "It was both." He goes, "How could it be both?" And I said, "Easy." I said, "Since God is sovereign over all, he providentially directs events, and he can prevent Satan from doing things, and sometimes he can permit Satan to act as his proxy. For example, when Satan afflicted Job, okay, God permitted him. So from one point of view, we could say that God afflicted Job. In another sense, we could say that Satan afflicted. I said something is only a contradiction if and only if both accounts cannot both be simultaneously true.
Exactly.
Accounts can differ,
true.
But they don't necessarily form a contradiction. Now, I'm going to tell you exactly what I said to this clown, and then I'll tell you what his response was to show you what a sloppy fool he was. I said, "Do you understand that when the Titanic sank, we had two differing reports? There were a group of survivors who said that the Titanic split in half. There was another group of survivors that said they did not witness the Titanic split in half." Now, people might say, well, that's a contradiction. No, it's not, because we now know what took place, because those survivors had different perspectives, and they were testifying what they saw. So when the Titanic began to rise up, as you saw it in the movie, it did split in half, but from one vantage point in the rescue boats, the survivors could not tell that it split in half. But the others who were at a different vantage point could see that it split in half. So these accounts are not contradictory. They just differ based upon the perspective. And I simply pointed out, I said, are you aware that in Hebrew literature, in the Old Testament, many times it may speak of God doing something when it is simply God permitting circumstances to coalesce under his providential direction, or permitting something to happen. And I said, so there's no contradiction between God and Satan both motivating. It doesn't say the means by which God motivated David to number the troops. Okay?
Yeah, you know, my favorite contradiction they try to bring up, the alleged contradiction, is the how many women were at the tomb and who was at the tomb first, you know, what time of day it was at the tomb, you know, those are the ones that killed me. I was like, man, after over decades and decades of this alleged contradiction being pointed out as not being a contradiction, people are still regurgitating these arguments.
I know.
It's amazing.
Yeah, I know. Here's a note from the side chat. Mark Harrison, guys like G-Man and True Empiricism and DD seem to have a genuine hatred for atheists. If I really hated them, I wouldn't confront them that they're going to stand before a holy God. I would just go on my merry way watching cable TV while these people are headed on their way to hell. But you know, exactly. you know, Mark Harrison, since you concluded that I hate atheists, do you ever point out the gross hatred and obscenity that are spewed by the atheists day in and day out for people like myself and other believers? Gee, how you overlook that, don't you?
And I thought I made it very clear that if people are going to sit up here still just want to criticize from the outside, but don't want to come in here and discuss things like men, like adults, you're not welcome in my chat.
Well, I often wonder why do these people even bother watching these videos? If they're too afraid to come in here. I mean, don't you have something better to do?
Go watch a movie or something, but don't,
because they want to sit back. No, listen, they want to sit back. They want to sit back, be snarky, pick their nose, and laugh at the dumb theist, but they don't have the testicular fortitude to come in here and stand their ground.
This is the reason why that I don't go to people's channels I don't like. There's plenty of people on here on G Plus that I think run terrible channels and terrible chats. But you know what I don't do? I don't go to their chats talking crap about how unfair they're being or how stupid they're running their chats. I just don't watch them. It's really that simple. They act like they can't do the same thing. It's just the old principle. If you don't like it, don't watch it. Point blank. I don't get what they don't understand about that.
Yeah, it's because they can't stay away. That's why they have to. At least see from the Christian standpoint, we have a purpose for why we do what we do, because we care about people's eternity. We care about their souls. What does the atheist have to offer? Nothing.
Exactly, but we're not going to sit up here. Yeah, we care about their souls. That's why we're here. But what we're not going to do, I mean, at least generally anyway, what we're not going to do, we're not going to go to their channels and criticize them to death on their channels and talk trash in their rooms and not come in. We're not going to do that. We're just not going to watch their stuff. We're not going to go to people's channels and just thumbs down their videos, because I'm pretty sure there's quite a few Christians here. There's a lot more atheists, I think, but there's a substantial amount of Christians on YouTube too. We don't go to their videos and thumbs it down. There's generally not a bunch of Christian or theist trolls, at least nowhere near to the amount that there is from the non-believing side, the atheist side. There's a ton of people who happen to be non-believers who are trolls on their side. I'm not saying there's none on the believing side, but there's a lot more on their side than ours. And when you see atheists put up videos and non-believers put up videos, most of their comments are thumbs up, maybe 2 or 3 thumbs down. You don't have a ton of believers coming on their channels, thumbs down on their stuff. That's what they do to our videos all the time.
All right. Well, if you want to attract people to come into the room from the opposing side, you have to give the titles of the room, make them a little bit more provocative.
Yeah, you mean just like something like why atheism is ridiculous or something like that?
Well, not really. How about saying can atheism give a rational defense? Can atheism give a rational defense of their worldview? Is atheism rational? Stuff like that.
Yeah, my whole issue is, man, it's just a bunch of, because it's like I said earlier, it's mostly men watching these hangouts. You have grown men acting like a bunch of little sissies here on the net. It's sad.
I do want to commend those who are willing and do have the testicular fortitude to engage in conversations with us, though.
Yeah,
so
I do want to
give them. Do want to respect, give hats off to those guys. Yeah.
I have a lot of respect for brothers here like Multiple. I like talking with him.
Hey, how about
I have
this?
a lot of, and although you ended up kicking him out the room, I do have a respect and appreciation that Gary did actually come in here. So I give him props and credit for that.
Well, wait. Well, guess what? It just a light went on in my head. Another contradiction that he made. He came in here because I was generalizing about atheists that I encounter in my experience here. He said I was being a bigot, and I said, "What's the problem with that?" And he said that it goes against the Bible. Well, wait a minute, Gary. The Bible's not reliable. You can't know what was in the original, so you can't be sure, according to Gary's viewpoint, that those passages which he thinks would mitigate against my alleged bigotry, how do you know that that was in the original, Gary? You see the contradiction there, gentlemen? You guys still there?
I'm going to tell you what, I'm going to start. Yeah, I heard you, man.
Well, how does he know that the verses in question that he thinks criticize me for my alleged bigotry? Well, he just basically said we don't have a reliable Bible. So what verses was he counting on that he considers reliable? You see, he contradicted himself. He first wants to point to a moralizing in the Bible as being authoritative that he tried to use against me, but then he turned right around when I asked him if he believed in the verbal, plenary, inerrant, infallible inspiration of the Bible. He said no. Therefore, he doesn't have an inerrant, infallible text. So how would he be able to determine that any moralizing was in the original? You see the point there?
Absolutely.
The guy contradicted himself.
Yeah, blatantly.
You know, can I make a point? Even though it's going to take me maybe about a minute or 2 minutes to make my point. Is that okay?
I'll mute my mic.
Yeah, take your time, bro.
I'm relatively new to the G Plus community. And speaking to you guys, Antonio, True, Veckel, Didi, and I find all of you guys to be very honest people, and I do find you guys to be reliable sources of information. I've argued, as you know, Antonio, and anybody who's watched, I've argued with the atheists about you guys and how, like, you know, there was a time that remember we were in the chat together, Antonio, and I was defending the fact that they were like, you don't know any biologists, and I was like, well, what does that have to do with anything? So
absolutely, and I gave you props for that, and I appreciate that.
And I did the same thing with G-Man when, you know, with the whole G-Man incident, they were like, I was like, no, you know, I think G-Man, you know, that's not true. So on both sides. I defend, and both sides I argue. There are certain things that I disagree with, but and this is from my own experience, and I don't want to offend anybody in this room. The only issue that I sometimes come against, and it's with Didi particularly, it's that sometimes in the back and forth, I think Didi is very skilled at cross-examination in terms of getting people to going deeper into the conversation and turning and twist and bringing up twists and turns, which I think is a skill that is very, very good, especially in debate. It's a great skill in debate. But I also think too that sometimes you make the same mistakes that you complain that others make. For instance, when we were having the argument on abortion, and it was said that Roe v. Wade didn't mention life of the mother. Now, I'm someone who's read the opinion a couple of times because I've read it in law school, and that being said, I thought it was maybe a mistake, and which it was. It obviously said it multiple times. It was actually part of the holding of the case, and I know that was a mistake. But during our conversation, it didn't come off as a mistake. It came off as, well, you don't know, because you said that, I know for a fact it's not in there, and because you know for a fact it's not in there, my position had to somehow be wrong. But then when people go back and look at the text and then see that term is actually in there like 12 or 13 times, it almost seems like there was a dishonesty going on where it doesn't matter what the truth was. It was just trying to win an argument or point an argument at that time. Now, hearing you guys' conversation now has led me to believe, and has changed my mind on it, especially with you, Didi, is that you're not really trying to just win a conversation. You're actually trying to educate. And I understand that now. But previously, I felt that you were just trying to win points in an argument. So I'll apologize to you for that point. But I would say in the future, we just need to be more careful when we put facts out there that might not be true. Or when we're in a debate with each other and we do put a fact that may not be true, and it's challenged, then maybe we should take the time to maybe look at that fact to see which side is correct. Because when we start making these large arguments and these points that aren't true and shift the conversation to a point that's not true, and then when people go back and look and find out that that was wrong, then it kind of makes it seem like the person was being dishonest when they were challenging that point. And that's really all I want to say, because like even with the argument for omnipotence, I actually went back and researched it and found out that yes, I am wrong, because words do have usages, and if you're using the word in a particular way and I'm challenging that, then I am wrong, because you're right. If you're saying that this is part of the way you're using the word, then I have to agree with that so we can move the conversation forward. So that's somewhere where I understand that I'm wrong. When Antonio brought up the fact about the rape exemption and how that really made little sense in a broader context, I was wrong on that. So I can admit when I'm wrong, but I also think that we have to admit that each one of us have to admit that sometimes we're wrong. We were making these points. And when that happens, we have to just admit it and then move on, because it grows the conversation in a way that's productive.
I think if I remember correctly, I probably said that you didn't know what you were talking about on that whole Roe v. Wade case, and I completely apologize for that if I said that. I think I did say that if I remember correctly, and if I said that, that was absolutely wrong, and I apologize for it.
I appreciate that. Thanks.
Yeah, and I also found out later on that you're a lawyer, right?
Yes, I'm an attorney.
Okay, cool. So yeah, you definitely have background in these matters. So
no,
I definitely would not have came across you that way, or would have come across that way if I would have had a bit more clarity on your background, or didn't just kind of knee-jerk a reaction. That was more of what it is than anything, because in my many conversations with people who identify as pro-choice, they just say a whole lot of non-facts about certain things, and I've looked into these issues myself quite a bit, and I think it was probably just a unwarranted knee-jerk reaction on my part, so I apologize for that.
No. But the thing is that even when we have these debates on being pro-choice and pro-life, I defer to you on a lot of these issues because you are more knowledgeable on the subject, and I try not to prop up the fact that my legal knowledge, because I don't think it matters. I think the truth matters. And if you have a good point, that matters. And if that's convincing enough, then I'll understand it. I try to work with what you give me. And it shouldn't matter. I think when you're trying to throw your qualifications out, like unfortunately I think what happened earlier, when you try to throw qualifications out to help bolster your point, it can help you, but if your point, at the end, the truth is what matters, and I think that's
Agreed. You see, yeah, I'll actually admit when I'm wrong, and it's not a big deal to me because, why not? It's not the worst thing in the world if you're incorrect on something. But I think a lot of times people's pride just gets in the way, man. Yeah, it does turn to a point to where you're just trying to win an argument instead of you being concerned about the truth. Because it's possible that you could still be incorrect about something, but win the argument. But it's also possible that you could be misinformed, and if your argument is incorrect, then it is what it is. Let the chips fall where they may, and adjust your views accordingly. I really wanted to get into further detail about that discussion at the time when we was talking about it, because when I was thinking of these cases, I was also thinking about cases like Doe v. Bolton as well. I'm pretty sure you're familiar with that case, right?
Doe v. Bolton? No, I'm not familiar with Doe v. Bolton. Mm-hmm. Which case is that?
Doe v. Bolton. That case was talking about trying to resolve certain issues on what mother exception means in regards to abortion. Like, basically the ruling was defined under the health of the mother, basically her mental health, her emotional health. And for these very reasons, it was very, very broad, to suggest, for these reasons, a woman can get an abortion with the consent of her doctor, like in the third trimester. But the ruling was so broad that it fit under, like mental health, emotional health. So when it's fit under such a broad scope, you can justify abortion for almost any reason as long as you get a doctor to sign off on it.
Yeah, I do think I agree with you 100%. I think what happens is the exception starts encompassing the rule, and it happens a lot of times, especially I think in law, is that you get this one little exception, but then that exception, because like you're saying, life of the mother, or health of the mother, and then that word health, when going through the process of being interpreted by the courts, starts getting to, like you're saying, mental health, emotional health, what at what level, what degree of health are we talking about, and it now has become more or less a joke. But it's interesting because the court was trying, from what I was reading, the last couple of cases I was reading, they were trying to narrow it in certain ways. And that's kind of the later case when the court became more conservative, when you started seeing Scalia and a lot of these other people started writing on these opinions, and Kennedy, who felt abortion should be legal, but also understood that there should be limitations, tried to narrow it in scope. But I think now you're right. I think now the exception has encompassed the rules. So
and don't take my word for it. As
I agree.
Someone who's more skilled, obviously, you being an attorney yourself, you can look into it and verify this for yourself.
I agree with you.
Can I just jump in? I wanted to mention something that we discussed earlier, just further proof of what I was saying. It's not on this thread. Gary Hall, who we were talking to, has a YouTube channel under the name of Phony Beatlemaniac XS, and he has a ton of his own videos. One of his videos is entitled "Why I Am a Unitarian." He told me he was a Christian. Antonio, Unitarians are not Christians.
Yeah, I do remember him saying that he was a Unitarian a while back. I think it was like maybe a couple weeks ago, maybe a month ago or so.
Now I want to ask now this is a question from ignorance, because for instance, and maybe my definition is overbroad. I consider for someone to be Christian, I believe that there are many different interpretations of Christianity, but I believe that there are some foundations. And I think Didi explained some of the foundations, like, you have to obviously be a theist, believe in God, believe in the teachings of Jesus, and so forth and so forth. So why would his brand not be considered a Christian in your guys' eyes?
There, in the past 100 years, someone wrote a book called the Five Fundamentals, and there were fundamental things that cannot be denied and still maintain that you're a Christian. One of those is the Trinity. All right. Now, there are groups that will affirm the deity of Christ, Trinity, etc., but they teach salvation by works. So they deny a fundamental of the faith. But in this guy's case, Gary Hall was in here. He was saying I was a bigot. He was saying I was violating scripture. But then he completely undermined his position when he said the Bible was a completely unreliable text. So the very text that he was using to criticize me for, he then said was unreliable. And then I find out from his site now that he's a Unitarian. Okay? So he is not a Christian even within the historic sense. Now, let's take, for example, Catholicism. I don't consider Roman Catholicism biblical Christianity. It's an amalgamation or it's a syncretizing of two opposing religions, paganism and Christianity. But they have, at least they appear at an appearance, hold to some fundamentals. But this guy denies the Trinity. In historic Christianity down through the centuries, if you don't affirm the Trinity, that is a central pillar of Christianity.
Now, I'd like to ask a question because two things. Number one, for the Trinity, the Council at Nicaea, this is something I was reading. I have no real background on this, but I was reading something about how that question of whether Jesus was God or if he was not was kind of decided at the Council of Nicaea when they put the Bible. I hope I'm saying it right, but when they actually decided on what would be the standard Bible.
No. The purpose of the church councils. Was to address a growing problem of apostasy that was occurring in various types of the Roman Empire. It was not to decide what biblical teaching was. The biblical teaching was established within the first century by the apostles and promulgated by their hand-picked disciples. It's common because of movies like The Da Vinci Code. And because they bastardized church history, they would have people believe that these councils met and they said, okay, this is what Christian doctrine is going to be. That's not what happened. These were church councils where they got together to make a unanimous declaration on things that the church had already believed, and to do so in a formal, codified manner. But it was not to introduce some new doctrine that was to be adhered to or invented. Okay?
Yeah, no, I agree with that 100%. My question, and actually, thank you for that, was actually a pretty good education. It sounds like you're a teacher because you really lay it all out. My question was because from what I had read, it seemed like there were two kind of schools of thought. One, a minority position that Jesus wasn't God, and the majority position, like you're saying, was that there was a Trinity. And that was kind of decided at a final point when the Bible was kind of put together after the Roman Empire. So that's what I was asking.
Well, you can see from even reading the New Testament text itself, the deity of Christ is explicitly taught. It's undeniable from the text.
I agree.
These uprisings of apostates were becoming an increasing problem. It wasn't that they were even a minority, but in order to stem an ever-growing problem. Look, let me give you an example. There's a really good theological book out there called Biblical Separation, and it goes through the Old Testament history, New Testament history, and church history on the problem of separation. Whenever institutions such as the nation of Israel or, quote, the church did not practice the principles of biblical separation, then apostasy began to accrue and to accumulate. And once institutions, at least from the point of church history, gained a significant amount of apostate adherents, that institution never went back to biblical orthodoxy. And so the church councils met in order to make formal declarations to stem the tide and the potential growth of apostasy. And apostasy just simply means a falling away from the biblical truth or doctrine. All right? So that was the purpose of these church councils, not to codify and invent new doctrine that they particularly liked, but that the doctrines that the church had historically, from the times of the apostles, promulgated. And so if you don't, like, for example, in terms of the contemporary church of the United States, when people start to water down doctrinal issues, then you start to have people participating in the church that do not hold to biblical doctrine. And that has an overall negative effect upon the doctrines of the church as time moves on, as generation goes from generation. And those aberrant views metastasize. You understand? You see, this is why a number of denominations have started, because previous denominations began to tolerate certain people who had apostate views, and they were growing in number, and those institutions at the highest levels of leadership would not put a stop to it. So you had new denominations arising. Now, that's not always the reason why denominations start, but a good number of denominations started precisely because of the apostasy that occurred. So this is a phenomenon. It's an ongoing phenomenon that was in the inception of the church. For example, when we look at the books of the New Testament, a lot of the content of the New Testament was to correct some false teachings or false ideas that were floating around there, and that they were not to be tolerated. So the church councils did not invent new doctrine. They were simply codifying in a written and policy way of what had already been originally established by Jesus and the apostles themselves.
That was a very good explanation. I appreciate it. Do you teach like Sunday school or something? Because you're very well at explaining these things.
I don't want to dodge your question, but it'll be seen.
I'm sorry if it's too personal.
I don't want to give out any personal information about myself. Not because I think you're a problem, but because there are other people who are a problem, who are stalkers, and any little pieces of information that they have on me, they would like to use against me.
Do not. Yeah, please do not say it. I apologize. I withdraw the question.
No. You don't have to apologize. You and I have butted heads in a debate, but I consider you a sincere person. You're not somebody who is malicious.
No, to be honest with you, my own position, just to be clear, is that I really want to know, and I really want to be convinced. Either way, I'm someone who's very open to Christian views, and I'm someone who's very open to kind of the atheistic views, but in a certain manner, because it's like, you have that feeling that there's something out there, that just can't ever be explained. And then by me having my family and everyone who also believes, it makes you wonder, why are you such a minority? What are you not seeing? What don't I understand? So that's what I'm trying to overcome. Just personally.
Let's put it this way. As somebody who's as an attorney, that in order to act as an officer of the court, you have to exercise, judgment and rationality. You have to use logic.
Of course.
But rationality and logic has to pre-exist before you can actually use it, right?
Yes, someone told it to me.
Right. And if there's no rules in jurisprudence, then all hell breaks loose in the courtroom. Then things become arbitrary. So there has to be some fixed rules or principles of jurisprudence, right? Now, the same is true in reality. So if we approach it from a Christian worldview, we do have fixed rules of reasoning and logic in jurisprudence because they are the product of an eternal God whose character, and nature is unchanging and non-arbitrary. And he's not capricious. And he has constructed a world that comports with his nature. So that's the why how human beings can have a baseline of interaction, because that God, and I'm gonna contrast this with the skeptical worldview. I'm just saying, if the Christian worldview is true, this is what the situation is. So the Christian God constructs the world in such a way where the laws of logic are absolute and universal, because he's the baseline for reality, and he could not have created it any other way, because his mind and his character are the essence of the laws of logic. See, most people think that the laws of logic that's just the way things are in reality. Well, no, they're not. They're that way because God is the ultimate reality. And what exists independent and external to him has to comport with what he is. So that's why the laws of logic are absolute and universal. Now, if we don't have an underlying rule of law that we can appeal to, all we're going to have is chaos and absurdity in courtrooms, right? Well, the same is true in a metaphysical sense. If somebody says either that there is no God, or they hold to a skeptical position, like saying, well, I neither affirm nor deny, they're not going to be they're not going to have a metaphysical foundation from which they can actually reason from. Because how do you establish that there are laws of logic from which we can reason from? Now, some skeptics want to say, well, they're self-evident. Well, that's false. They're not self-evident, because one does not have a sensory experience of all times and all places. Now, some people try to use further reasons, saying, well, it could not be otherwise. So how do you know that? They'll say, well, because that would be incoherent. Well, there's two ways it could be incoherent. One, that it contradicts the laws of logic, and that would be circular reasoning. So we can chuck that out. And the only other way it could be incoherent is meaning it would be unintelligible or understandable. Well, just because we don't understand something doesn't necessarily mean it's not true. So you see, so you see from the non-Christian worldview, from an atheistic or agnostic worldview, there is no foundation from which to reason from. One merely has to adopt the laws of logic as an unjustifiable axiom or assumption, right? Now, but there's nothing binding or obligatory about comporting the one's reasoning. But they might argue, well, everybody does. You might as well play by the rules. But that's just simply elevating human culture and conventionality as to be the rule, just because that's the way most people think. So you have to ask yourself is, do we exist within a world where things are actually intelligible? That there is a world that there is a basis for rationality? And you see, if you say yes, then that comports with the Christian worldview. But in the atheistic worldview, there's no way for that to be demonstrated. Now, some atheists
respond to you by saying, well, evolution.
That makes the matter worse, because the way that they think, they just happen to evolve that way. Yeah. Evolution changes due to survivability, not for truth.
Yeah.
Okay? So you see, either the morality that we possess is an illusion or it's not an illusion. If we evolve, then morality is just an illusion of evolution. But if it's not an illusion, if some things are really wrong, then they're wrong because there is some objective, eternal standard. And in the Christian worldview, that would be the character and nature of God. So you see, without the Christian God, there's no basis for morality. There's no basis for logic. There's no basis for laws other than human beings voting. In fact, if there is no God and we just evolved, then our laws is just that the big chimpanzees dominated with the bigger clubs over the smaller chimpanzees with the smaller clubs. That's all right. Laws would be. So you see, you have to ask yourself, people have core beliefs about the nature of reality. They, like for example, you believe that there are underlying laws of physics and chemistry, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, you said multiple. Oh.
Yes.
Yeah. So okay. You do. Now that's what we would call the uniformity of nature. Now, nobody really questions this, except on a philosophical level, right? You don't question it. I don't question it. Now, from the Christian worldview, the reason why you don't is God has made you to innately know this. But from a non-Christian worldview, that's just an assumption. But you see, if you don't believe in the uniformity of nature, then everything is chaos and absurdity. So you can't prove the uniformity of nature. You can't have evidence for the uniformity of nature because all of the events that we observe, even putting a man on the moon, are indistinguishable from chance. And I pity, as Mr. T would say, I pity the fool who tries to argue that the uniformity of nature can be established over the events that we see by chance. There's no way to distinguish the two. So the reason why people from their viewpoint accept the uniformity of nature is because without it, everything is absurdity. And the same would be true for your assumption that your basic cognitive functioning is reliable. There can't be any evidence for it. There is no justification. You have to assume it. The same is true for your assumption that your basic sense perceptions are reliable. The same is true that your basic memory faculties are reliable.
Yeah.
And you also assume the laws of logic. So these 5 pillars of rationality and intelligibility, now I'm not saying that those are the only ones, but those are the basic ones. There is no way to prove or justify these, but all skeptics believe this, and they believe it because without it, everything is meaningless. And that's the same reason why the Christian God exists.
Let me ask you something. Do you
If
think
if the Christian God doesn't exist, then everything is absurd and meaningless.
let me ask you something. Do you think evolution was instituted to get away from God?
I think the theory of evolution is the fulfillment of 2 Thessalonians.
I can't remember what 2 Thessalonians says.
Hold on 1 second. I have to switch my
But
headset.
I would like to I'd like Didi's changing his headset. So
Okay, I'm good now. Can you hear me?
yes.
Okay, all right, go ahead.
Well, the arguments that you made, they sound compelling.
Hold on a second. My mic went out again. Hold on a second. All right, say something.
Yes, hello.
All right, go ahead.
You're good. All right. I was saying these arguments sound compelling, but they run. There are certain issues that come up with them, and just the way I break things down, I like to try to just to understand it in a very linear way. You know, A, B, C, and I understand that you say to even do that, there has to be this being. But as you're going through what you were saying, at first you defined God and you defined the Christian God, and you defined him in these very specific ways and said, you know, this being has to exist. Then you said that there are all these unknowns that we don't know about. You know, we don't know how we do this, or we don't know about the laws of logic, for instance. We don't know where they'll come from. It seems like all these things that we just don't know. And then you seem to attribute those things to God. Then you kind of developed some conclusions about, let's say, evolution, you know, why it can't do it, and seem to kind of build those up and then, you know, destroy them at the end, saying, you know, well, this is why this is bad and this is why this is bad. And at the end, I'm just trying to understand why this wouldn't be considered just an argument from ignorance, because you haven't made it clear. You're trying to say because of these conclusions that we don't understand, this being has to exist. And I'm challenging that, because you defined the thing that you need for this thing to exist. You haven't demonstrated that it actually does exist.
Hey, Didi, are you there, man? He's probably fixing his mic or something.
All right, how about now?
Yeah, I can hear you, man.
Okay, yeah, I just had to switch mics. Okay, all right. So I'm trying to remember. I lost my train of thought there for a second. Tell me what your last two sentences were. Oh, it was an argument from ignorance, right? Hello?
That's not really fair.
Hello? Oh gosh, this stupid mic. Hold on a second. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Well, the problem is with this one wired mic that I was using Bluetooth. When I use this other one, I got to get a new wired headset because the connector is a little bit flaky. Okay. You said that it sounds like it's an argument from ignorance, right?
No, I'm asking you why is the being that you've defined that to be necessary? Why does it have to exist? I'm trying to just justify that, because you defined him and said he has to exist. But I'm just asking you why and if you don't know, how does it change life now? Because even if we say we just don't know yet, how does that make anything different?
Okay, without the Christian God,
Pascal's wager.
No, it's not Pascal's wager. Without the Christian God, then existence is absurdity. Because the Christian God has revealed himself. And what he has revealed is that he is omnipotent, omniscient, and always truth revelatory. And that revelation consists of natural revelation, innate revelation, and special revelation. Now, if we start from the Christian God's revelation, and you see, I'm not going to take a stance of neutrality and put God on trial. Now, I'm not saying that in a pejorative sense, but if the Christian God exists and he gives revelation, then that revelation needs no, nor can it have, external justification or demonstration. It is self-authenticating and self-attesting, even if the mind of man says, Now, to ask for a justification or a demonstration that the revelation of God is what it is, independent of God, is a logical incoherency. Because if the Christian God exists, he is the final determiner as to what the nature of reality is on all things, not the mind of man. See, the skeptic and the atheist think the mind of man is autonomous, but the mind of man is not autonomous within the Christian worldview. Now, when the skeptic or the Christian says, I want justification for the things that I believe in, that request is an arbitrary one, because the very basis of that demand are basic beliefs about the nature of reality for which there are no justifications for. A justification that something is the case would require that the uniformity of nature would be true. A justification that something would be the case would require that our basic cognitive functioning is reliable. It would also require that our basic sense perception is reliable, that our basic memory capacity is reliable, and it would also require that the laws of logic be the case. But none of these 5 things can be demonstrated or justified. But in order to justify something, according to the skeptic's reasoning, they would have to rely on these unjustifiable starting points. So the request that the revelation of God be justified independently of God's revelation is not only an incoherency, it's a form of mental arbitrariness. You see the problem?
I like the way William Lane Craig explains it as there's 5 things that science cannot prove, but yet we're reasonable to believe. One of those things is the metaphysical mind.
Well, when he says they're reasonable, he cannot say that from a Christian worldview. He has to temporarily abandon his worldview to make that statement, which he does.
Exactly, but I think as Christians sometimes we have to, just to entertain the other people's belief, like step in their shoes.
Well, but you see, there is no basis for rationality within the skeptical worldview. There is none, zero.
We know that.
But then you end up with people like me who cannot by any means justify not having such a being. For these things that exist, there may be some cause, but I just don't know. I definitely agree that being can exist, and I can't say that being does not exist. And it's not the fact that he's been defined to exist. It's just that the justification I'm asking for is that you've explained in logical terms why you think this being should exist.
Because without accepting the revelation of the Christian God, if you just simply don't accept it, it's not even an outright denial. Without accepting it, then immediately your worldview becomes darkness.
This is where mathematics and logic step in. You see what I'm saying?
If you deny, let me just finish. If you do not accept and affirm the uniformity of nature, your world plunges into darkness and absurdity. You cannot reason without having the uniformity of nature as a precondition. And then we go down the other four pillars of rationality. Okay? We don't have evidence for them. There can't be evidence for them. All right? Now, people don't have any problem with saying, I don't need evidence, because without it, our world is meaninglessness. And in fact, they can't even say that. In fact, if you don't embrace these 5 pillars of rationality without evidence and without justification, you can say nothing. You can't even reason without embracing them. So the reason why we embrace them is because without them, existence is meaningless. Well, the same thing is true for the Christian God. Deny the Christian God, and your existence is meaningless. Because you could believe, you can sit there and say, oh, no, I don't accept the Christian God, but I have these axioms. I have these starting points at the core of my beliefs, that there's a uniformity of nature, and I have memory reliability and cognitive functions, and I have an axiom that there's a uniformity of nature. That doesn't demonstrate anything. It just means that you have simply arbitrarily chosen a belief.
Well, let me raise my 2 objections, and maybe when I was speaking before, I wasn't clear of exactly what I mean. Well, my first objection would be the fact that even if I do accept your premise that this being has to exist, you're giving me a very specific version of it. You're saying it's the Christian God. There are other gods, and I think all of those other people who believe in those other versions would say the same thing. This is a necessary being. You can't even ask that question without them. So what would give you what would justify you saying yes? This is
exclusive right to the Christian God. Is what he's looking
Okay,
for.
so in order for somebody to do that, okay, and I had this happen. It happens every time, where the skeptics reach the end of their rope.
Yeah, we were talking about this earlier.
Yeah. The skeptics reach the end of their rope, and they have to abandon their worldview in order to even make any potential rational statements about existence. And so what they want to do is they want to embrace an alternative or parody of the Christian worldview. So by virtue of saying, well, what about Islam or Hinduism or any other competing theistic worldview? By immediately saying, well, what about that? It immediately slays the dragon of skepticism.
Why don't they say, what about agnosticism?
Yeah, they can't. Now, the problem with these other worldviews is the overwhelming majority of reasons why people bring these up is not because they're embracing it in order to make sense. They're simply embracing it in order to escape the Christian God and his revelation. Now, there are cases where people are, I'll use this loosely, sincere in their alternate theism, but their systems cannot stand up to scrutiny. Let's take Islam as probably the major competitor to the Christian worldview. Allah is the great deceiver. He doesn't always give truthful revelation, whereas the Christian God cannot lie. He always gives truthful revelation. Do you understand?
Yes.
Now, when it comes to Hinduism, all is God. So contradictions are valid within Hinduism. All is one, right? So Hinduism goes out the window if you're going to hold to the principle of non-contradiction. If you're going to hold to the principle of non-contradiction, out goes Islam, because we have clear examples of contradictions. Now, at this point, the atheists will generally say, oh, what about all the contradictions in the Bible? I mean, how many times? This is like clockwork of how they respond. And when you go one by one with these alleged contradictions, when you actually investigate them in a fair-minded and neutral way, and you look into the culture, you look into the genre, you look into the original Greek and Hebrew, the overwhelming majority of these texts, which are alleged to be contradictions, completely evaporate. And in fact, there have been a number of contradictions that I wasn't familiar with. And upon hearing about it, Googling it, I find a plethora of websites that deal with these passages and why they are not actual contradictions. Right? So the bottom line is these alternative theistic worldviews do not stand up under scrutiny. And at the end of the day, the skeptic who is hypothetically presenting these are only doing so with the motivation to avoid the Christian God as the foundation and basis for a rational world. Now, I could go on talking about evidences for the Christian God, but to somebody who is a determined skeptic, a determined agnostic, a determined atheist, evidence is simply conclusions following sensory experiences that comport with somebody's collection or web of beliefs. So whatever evidences I present to the skeptic, he can just simply write them off because it doesn't comport with his set of basic beliefs. So
what evidence would someone ask to prove that? Yeah, I agree with you 100% with that, because I don't know what evidence could you show that would be convincing that this transcendent being exists. I don't think the question even really makes sense.
Because because evidence is not something that is objective. In science, all observations are inherently theory laden. So anytime that we have a sensory experience, okay, let's say you and I are hiking and I point out a rock, I'm having a sensory experience and I'm forming an immediate, almost unconscious conclusion based upon my web of beliefs about the nature of reality. And I could say, well, that rock is evidence. But whatever I say to you about that rock being evidence is simply the product of my web of beliefs. And so you see, if you have a differing set of beliefs, and what my conclusions, which are the product of my web of beliefs, do not comport with your chosen web of beliefs, then it is not evidence to you.
See, I was understanding it. I was understanding what you were saying as the reason why the Christian God has to exist is because if he doesn't exist, then you couldn't even ask the question.
You can't even reason. You can't even reason
to that.
It is, think of it this way. It is analogous, or I should say parallel, to somebody saying, I want justification and evidence for the uniformity of nature. And you say to them, there can't be any. You have to accept it. And the reason why is, if you don't accept it, your world plunges into darkness. But you see, the skeptic, when they hear this, they understand that if they don't accept these pillars of rationality that I gave you, the uniformity of nature, reliability of cognitive functioning, memory, sense perception, and the laws of logic, they get it, that if they don't accept these and embrace them, that they are the case, without evidence, without justification, everything in their world, everything is darkness. It's all absurdity. The same is true with the Christian God. But you see, because they have a set of beliefs and they've already made up in their mind either God doesn't exist or he probably doesn't exist, they insist, well, I want evidence for this. Well, you don't want evidence for the basic beliefs that you hold about the nature of reality. Why do you believe these basic things without evidence? And because their answer is, I don't have any other choice. Well, you don't either. Deny the Christian God. If somebody says, nope, you don't even have to say the Christian God doesn't exist. By not affirming and embracing the Christian God and the way he is defined and described in the Bible, then there is no basis for rationality or intelligibility in spite of what people think. Skeptics and atheists have to borrow from the Christian worldview that it is the case that these pillars of rationality exist.
You know, maybe my objection is best laid out in an analogy. For instance, how would you explain to a blind man, someone who's been blind from birth, what the color red was? Now, you generally, if we're trying to tell somebody what a color is, we'll describe something else, the color of blood, maybe a tomato or something like that, something that's cherries or red, things of that nature. We would, here's what our representation of red is. But to someone who's blind from birth, he can easily deny, well, red does not exist. You have no justification. You can't explain it to me. I need to know how red. Hold on. Let me just finish this. I know what, I know what I know, and I know there is no red. And then this guy says, but that doesn't mean red doesn't exist. That doesn't mean that we don't have the experience of red. It just means that, we can't explain it in a way that makes sense right now. There may be
well, the problem, multiple, that's a good point. The problem isn't that the skeptic can't explain things. He never can arrive that is the case. Ever. And in fact, in the skeptic's worldview, if you don't affirm the Christian God, all you're left with is materialism. And therefore, what you think about the nature of reality is simply the product of antecedent material conditions. So in other words, you didn't choose to become an attorney. You did not choose to become a lawyer. All of those incidences were the causal sequence of prior antecedent conditions. Unless, of course, as a skeptic, they want to deny the principle of causation and the uniformity of nature. But they can't deny it. So you see, if you affirm materialism, then you can't affirm materialism. If you don't affirm the Christian God, you can affirm nothing.
But that's just like saying to the blind man can say there is no red and that means that red can't exist. Just because the sighted person can't explain it to him doesn't mean that red doesn't exist. And that's what I'm trying to ask you to explain.
Well, here's the problem. Here's the problem. Have you ever heard of a blind person that said, no, I don't believe that there are colors? No, you haven't.
That's why I said I was appealing to an analogy. I was just trying to understand your position, because
but guess what? But guess what?
What you had said was
here's the problem. Here's the problem.
These things don't exist without this being.
But you see, a blind man's ability to have intelligibility and rationality is not dependent on a particular type of sense perception that he doesn't have. But he is relying on his sense perception. Do you understand? He doesn't have a complete orbed sense perception, but he does have sense perception, even though it's short of what you and I have. So he doesn't have to affirm that color exists in order to make rational sense of his existence. But he does have to affirm that there is sense perception.
Yeah, the bottom line is, going back to what I titled this hangout, the role of faith for Christians and non-believers. Yeah, the atheist really doesn't have a sound basis for where they stand. They just believe what they believe off of faith. There is no reasoning behind what they're doing, because I think it makes a lot of sense that denying the Christian God will leave you only in a spirit darkness. But even if you don't take a presuppositional approach, if you take an evidentialist approach, like what often William Lane Craig does, the atheist simply does not have an objective basis for objective moral values and duties. And since they don't have such a basis, all they can do is rely on faith as the basis they have for objective moral values and duties. They just rely off what the conventions of men will do, for example, and they just put their faith in their ability in men instead of with any objective basis. So there's a whole lot of faith that goes on for the atheists, a ton of it, probably if not more than the Christians.
You see, I'm glad that you brought up the issue of the blind man, because color, or the absence of color, is not going to prevent a blind man from being rational. But a denial of sense perception would. So it's game over to the blind man if he denies that his basic sense perception is reliable. Game over. Okay? If you do not affirm these 5 pillars, then you have no rationality about anything. You can affirm nor deny anything. Now, the skeptic will reason, well, I don't need the Christian God because I could live in a possible world where these things were brute facts. And let's say hypothetically that world exists, right? Well, there's no means whatsoever to apprehend that. It can't be apprehended. So nothing that a skeptic reasons or thinks or says can be verified or falsified. So even though these 5 things, these pillars, might be brute facts, the skeptic is still groping around in the darkness.
That's the very definition of blind faith to me. It just seems like just about everything that they accuse Christians of, it's just projections of their own worldview, what they do in their own way that they reason themselves from their position. They just project everything.
I think they get these arguments from Arnold Roth. He likes to say a lot of times that it's dishonest in believing something that you can't prove that is that is evidentially true or whatever he says. But Arnold Roth is one of the biggest faith havers here on the internet. He believes that a single cell evolved into a multi-cell. No one's ever witnessed that. No one's ever seen that. You know what I mean? They believe what the scientists are predicting. Therefore, it's true. That's faith.
And there's too many out there that believe that something can literally come from nothing, like creation ex nihilo. Like, and then what I would hear to that is, well, you think God creates things out of nothing? And I'm like, well, even if that's true, at least you have something to create something. So you really can't call God just creating out of nothing.
How do you verify that a singularity? I mean, like with no faith whatsoever, everything has to be with proof and everything. How do you verify that a singularity expanded and create the universe with having no faith whatsoever? Arnold Roth can't do that. He can't prove that. None of these scientists can prove that without using some sort of faith. Yes.
G-Man, it's even worse than that. A skeptic or an atheist cannot verify anything. And if they say
by that.
they cannot determine that anything is the case in such a way that they cannot be wrong. So what they have to do now is define verification and falsification is that it would comport with their unverifiable, unfalsifiable basic assumptions about the nature of reality. So from a skeptic's point of view, there is no actually verification or falsification. It's just a verification by assumption. Well, I verify this because it comports with my assumptions, or I falsify something because it doesn't comport with my basic assumptions and the reasonings built upon those basic assumptions. So from Aaron Ra's worldview, there is no ultimate verification or assumption. It's just whatever comports or does not comport with their fundamental assumptions about the nature of reality.
Okay, so you're saying that this is true in regards to science, or you're saying that this is in regards to anything?
Anything. They can't verify or falsify anything. Look, if you say, if not you, G-Man, but if an atheist says that's false, the means by which you can demonstrate that something is false is by virtue of the law of non-contradiction. You would have to make a determination that there is a state of affairs that is the case in such a way that you cannot be wrong, and that another proposed state of affairs stands in contradiction to what that is true. And by virtue of the law of non-contradiction, both state of affairs cannot be true. And since one state of affairs is verified that it is the case, therefore the second state of affairs cannot be true and therefore is false. But you see, the skeptic is not in a position that he can justify or demonstrate that the laws of logic are absolute and universal. They just have to accept them as brute facts. They'll just say, "Well, it's a part of my basal assumptions. It's a part of my basic my properly basic beliefs." I don't care if they call them properly basic beliefs.
Okay, are you saying that because the atheist doesn't follow the laws of logic and they follow another set of rules or whatever, that somehow means that they can't verify anything? Like, for example,
they use the law of non-contradiction, but they have no means by which they can demonstrate that it is the case that the laws of logic are universal. So when they say something is false, what they are really saying, whether they realize it or not, is what you or I are saying does not comport with the very basic assumptions that they have about the nature of reality and any reasoning built upon those assumptions. So they can't verify anything.
As far as philosophy, or is that true for like basic things like
that's everything. They can't verify, G-Man, they can't verify anything.
They can't verify the fact that they're male or female or anything like that, or are you talking about something else?
No, because every conclusion that they make about the nature of reality ultimately rests upon basic assumptions for which they cannot verify. Like one guy said to me, "Well, I can verify that I'm not a chick." I said, "How do you do that?" He goes, "Oh, just look in my pants." And I said, "But you're assuming the uniformity of nature. You're assuming the reliability of your basic cognitive reasoning. You're assuming the reliability of your sense perception, and you're also assuming the reliability of your memory capacity that you could remember accurately what you saw in your pants."
So how does a non-atheist come to the conclusion that something that's I'm sorry, how does a non-theist verify something and not verify something?
They can't verify anything. Their verification is just simply whatever comports to what they assume.
So you can't verify anything based on facts?
From a skeptical worldview, nothing can be ultimately verified in the sense that nothing can be determined in such a way that they cannot be wrong.
No, I hear what you're saying with the atheist. I'm talking about the non-atheist. Like, for example, myself as a Christian. Like how do Christians verify something? Like how does the theist verify? Like, let's say that I don't know that this hamburger tastes good or whatever, or my computer.
All right. Okay. You verify something in that the Christian God exists as he is defined and described, and he has constructed a world in such a way that we can know some things that we cannot be wrong about. Okay? So for example, some people say, well, we can't know that we're not a brain in the vat. I would say, yeah, we can know. God has revealed to us through natural revelation, innate revelation, and special revelation that the physical world actually exists, and that we're not brains in a vat, or that we're not in the matrix. The Christian God has revealed, and his revelation is self-authenticating, self-attesting, that he has constructed the sun, the moon, and the stars. That they're actually things that exist, as opposed to that these are simply an illusion in some grand dream. So verification and falsification ultimately rests upon the existence of the Christian God and how he has constructed this world. Deny the Christian God and you can verify nothing.
Oh, okay. So so that the non-atheist, the theist, can verify something.
No, you would have to be a Christian theist. You would have to subscribe to the Christian worldview.
Wait a minute, you couldn't be a Satanist and verify something?
If you don't affirm the Christian God, then how are you going to verify something?
No, I hear what you're saying. I'm just trying to understand where you're coming from.
I'm not arguing with you. I'm responding to you like you're being devil's advocate. I understand where you're coming from.
Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna mute my microphone and think about what you just said.
Yeah.
All right.
And you see, atheists and skeptics think all the time, what are you talking about? We put men on the moon. But you see, what they fail to recognize is that can be equally explained by chance. And they think, well, that's ridiculous, because surely if it was by chance, we would see some inconsistencies. But you see, the moment they say that, they undermine their own evolutionary worldview. You see,
that's a very good point.
Atheists always reason it doesn't matter how improbable all of the mutations that would have to accrue in a step-by-step fashion over millions of years to produce the genome of the animal kingdom. It doesn't matter how improbable. If it has at least one chance, then it could happen no matter how improbable. And that goes for the initial conditions of the universe and all of the cosmological constants that would be necessary for life. So you see, they embrace a worldview. It doesn't matter how improbable things are. If there's still a chance, it could still happen. Well, guess what? Doesn't matter how improbable it is that we put a man on the moon by chance. If there's a chance, it could happen. So the skeptic has no ability whatsoever in terms of observing the success of science to determine that they've actually understood the laws of physics versus they just got lucky. Now,
so
from the Christian world,
so how do you feel about, let's say, for instance, I was reading this, and I think there was a book I was reading about this, and they were talking about how the multiverse, if that theory is true, that could even that hypothesis turns out to be true, that could explain some of these issues with the probability of chance. Because, for instance, if you're talking about an infinite number of galaxies, and each galaxy, from what we know, can be infinite in of itself, you have, every possibility could play out because of just the sheer numbers. We can see as far as we can see, but we believe that the universe that we can see is vast. It could be infinite for all we know. So you're talking about more, what we can see are more stars in the sky than grains of sand on all the beaches in the world. And with those types of numbers,
that's a slogan.
Don't you think that's a slogan? Would that not even lend to the possibility that these chances could play out in one of these scenarios, these trillions of chances?
Well, here's the problem. The multiverse is proffered by scientists who either embrace philosophical naturalism or are leaning in that direction simply to avoid the design implications of what appears to be a very finely tuned universe. Number two, there is no evidence for a multiverse, right? So according to these people who are skeptics, we don't even consider something unless there's evidence for it. You see, why don't you believe in God, Mr. Atheist? Well, because there's no evidence. But maybe a multiverse can account for existence. Well, do you have any evidence for it? No. Well, then they have arbitrary reasons for the ideas that they're going to put forward to explain our existence. Now, there are other problems with the multiverse as well, because there would have to be fine tuning in order to account for the multiverse itself in terms of something that would generate the multiverses. So even that's problematic. Okay, the Bible says, professing themselves to be wise, they became fools. Now, what's the context of that? It means they rejected God, and even more specifically, after the biblical revelation, they reject the Christian God and they embrace philosophical naturalism, or they worship the creation rather than the creator, and they became fools. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools. Okay?
Well, I just want to make it very clear. You are 110% right. There is absolutely no evidence for the multiverse, and if I made it seem like there was any evidence for it, I apologize. You're
No.
110%
Don't
correct.
apologize. I perfectly understood what you were making a legitimate, not an objection. You were making you were raising a legitimate concern there. There's nothing to apologize for.
Yeah, I gotta point out something real quick. Tim in the chat said that Didi was contradicting himself. Could you explain what you mean, man?
Oh, I wrote. I said that he was refuting himself because how does he know the Bible's true when the Bible is evidence to him? Because like he says that like evidence is not true. So like the Bible's is what he goes by. So how does he go by that?
The way that I know that the Bible is the Word of God is the only means. The only way that I can know this is the same way I can ultimately know anything is the case, and that is by the revelation of the Christian God. There is no independent means of justification that anything is the case without the Christian God being at its foundation.
But that's like circular though.
Well, hold on.
Okay. Well, hold on a second. Hold on. It is circular, but if are you going to say that all circular reasoning is fallacious?
Hold on, let me jump in here real quick, Didi. I know your approach. Like I'm gonna come at him with my approach, and then you can come at him with yours afterwards. Are you aware that the Bible is a collection of historical documents?
Yeah, by different people. It's like linked together.
It's a collection of historical documents over a period of 1,000 to 1,500 years. So if you're gonna say these collection of historical documents is circular reasoning, that just doesn't make any sense.
No, what he's objecting,
no, I'm not saying that's
Antonio. What he's saying is my embracing that the Bible is the Word of God because it says the Word of God. He's saying that's circular, and he's correct. He's absolutely correct.
Well,
but that's not a problem. That's not a problem in the Christian worldview, because in the Christian worldview, Tim, the Christian God is the only ultimate means by which anything can be justified to be the case.
Well,
if you
I'm coming at it from a different angle, though. I get the angle you're coming at from. I'm just trying to come at it from sort of a secular evidentiary angle.
He's not objecting to the Bible as a historical document.
Right. But what I'm challenging him on is saying that pointing to the Bible in the sense that if you got people talking about this God exists and use that as support for the Christian God, why in the world would using evidence to support this being be circular reasoning? Why would using what other people have claimed about God to support evidence for the existence of God be circular reasoning?
That's not like what I'm talking about. I'm talking about.
I'm conceding to Tim that when he says to me, what is your justification that the Bible is the Word of God? I said, because God says it's the Word of God in there. And he says that's circular. And he's correct.
No, what I'm doing is I'm using his own standard of criteria and try to analyze the reason why, even if we assume his criteria, what he's saying is incorrect.
Well, he can't say it's incorrect. He has no basis in his worldview to do so,
Yeah,
unless he embraces the Christian God.
He first has to explain why even circular reasoning is fallacious in and of itself.
Right. Well, let me ask you, Tim. Let me ask you this question. Okay.
Because can I answer Rebecca?
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
Because when I say something like, okay, I think Trump is the best president because Trump is the best president. Wouldn't that not sound like? Wouldn't that just not sound right? Nothing to back it up. Just saying
circular reasoning. Circular reasoning is generally considered fallacious. Okay, and I don't have a problem with that. But you see, when it comes to verification, Tim, what is our ultimate means of verifying anything? What would that be? If for example, if I show you my driver's license, what is the ultimate means by which you can use to verify?
My sight, seeing.
Okay, but what if your sense perception isn't correct? What if your memory about what the requirements are to be a driver's license is faulty? What if your basic cognitive reasoning is not reliable?
Well, I could just listen to what someone else says.
And what are you assuming that their sense perception is reliable?
Right.
Are you okay? See, ultimately, if you say that you reject all circular reasoning, then I'm going to ask you, what is your means then? You see, the circular reasoning from the Christian worldview it's not a fallacy. Hold on 1 second. I got something ringing in my ear. I hate this.
Let me ask you something real quick, Tim. When you argue and you assume the laws of logic, do you ask for proof that the laws of logic are true?
No, I just trust them because I guess it's more simple.
Hold on a second,
Yeah,
Tim.
That's circular reasoning, though,
Are
right?
the laws of logic true because the laws of logic are true?
I trust it.
Why?
So
That's circular reasoning.
No. You believe that there's laws of logic. Are the laws of logic do they exist because they exist?
I know it's circular, but like that's how you go by it too.
No, but you see, but here's the problem is this is the Christian God is the ultimate means of verification. All right.
Yeah.
So
you just say that though.
But Tim,
say that. Why should I believe that?
Okay.
Here's the problem, Tim.
Why do you believe the basic beliefs that you have about the nature of reality? Those are unverifiable.
Right. Why in the world would you have a problem with?
Can I jump in real quick?
Just real quick. Why would you have a problem with DD? You saying giving the circular argument, but you using the circular argument for the laws of logic?
Because that's what everybody goes by. That's how he got the revelation. He goes by the same.
So you're objecting to circular reasoning while you're using circular reasoning.
Right.
But the circular reasoning starts with for everybody. Everybody goes by that reasoning.
Actually, not everybody uses circular reasoning. They will start with axioms.
Yeah, they all start with that.
Yeah, some people do start with axioms.
Okay, but you see, axioms are unjustifiable.
Yeah, they're
still circular
unjustifiable
when you get finished.
So in other words, you want a justification that the revelation of the Christian God is the revelation of Christian God, but you hold to other beliefs, core beliefs about the nature of reality for which you have no justification for. Why do you have a different standard?
But hold on, but before I want to sneak this in here because there was something. Didi, you said if you don't have your sense perception, how would you know? But I would challenge you and say, if you strip the man of all his sense perception, he couldn't see, he couldn't feel, he couldn't hear, taste, all that, how could you convince him that he was alive? You know, how would you do that? How would you convince that person that
Well,
they were alive?
You can't. Only God would be able to do that, because we would have the barrier that there's no means to communicate him. He has no sense perception.
So, but that's what I'm saying. His communication to the outside world are through those senses, and that's what I'm trying to understand. Because you're saying if you strip him of all that, then senses can't be justified and they shouldn't exist.
I'm not. No, I'm
But
not
it's
saying
like-
strip him of sense perception. What I'm saying is, Tim is assuming that sense perception is reliable. That's not the same thing as saying there's no sense perception.
Yeah, we're trying to get him to understand why does he pick and choose when he accepts circular reasoning, when he throws it out the window.
I'm not picking and choosing. Everybody goes by
Okay, all right.
But
Tim,
when you start with your revelation, you start
Where's
from
the circular
action.
reasoning involved in foundationalism?
What's the question, Matt?
Where's the circular reasoning involved in foundationalism?
I don't think it necessarily does.
Right, so the foundationalist is not arguing in a circle.
Well, we're not saying that. We're saying that Tim was being circular.
Right.
He's using foundationalism.
No. Tim was just saying he was saying, well, it's true because it's true.
You mean his senses to the external world?
No, he was not. Tim's position was not that he holds to his core beliefs because they're assumptions. He just said that because they were true.
Yeah, so that's an assumption you make, yes.
No, and that's circular. But you see, Tim, let's put it this way. Let's assume, just for the sake of argument, that the Christian God exists. Everything that exists is contingent upon that Christian God. He upholds all things by the powers of his will. Right? Now, if the Christian God exists, he's the ultimate means by which anything can be determined to be the case. Right? If you say, I want an ultimate means of justifying that the Christian God's revelation, that's a logically incoherent request, because there can be no ultimate means of justification independent of the Christian God. So the verification of the Christian God, how is that false?
Because the God of Islam could be the ultimate means of
justification.
God of Judaism or some other God or some other being.
We've already covered that, Matt. You weren't here for that. We've already discussed that. This is a debate between the Christian worldview and skepticism.
Why?
Because that's the parameters of what we were discussing, and we've already discussed.
Why would they accept those parameters?
We've already discussed that the God of Islam contradicts himself, and the God of Islam is the greatest of all deceivers.
But so what? And Islam would say the same about your God.
I don't care. I don't care what they say.
Well, they don't care what you say.
But you see, Matt. I'm not going to put God on trial. I have a starting position that is not negotiable. Good, and I'm gonna compare the Christian God to any competitors. And the Christian God says there are no other gods.
Yeah, and the God of Judaism says there's no other gods, and the God of Islam says there's only one God. They all say the same.
Right. Okay, we've been down this road before. We're really not discussing other theistic competitors. We're discussing Christianity versus skepticism.
That's the problem. I've never heard you discuss.
I have discussed it on many occasions. I've discussed it on many occasions. I've actually discussed it with you, but with Tim, the subject matter that we're discussing is the Christian worldview versus skepticism, not the Christian worldview versus other theistic. Okay. I don't have to demonstrate it. He's demonstrated it already.
When?
Through natural revelation, innate revelation, and special revelation.
Did you do that, Tim? Did you show that the God of Christianity exists, Tim?
No, he's a skeptic.
So I'm asking you to demonstrate to a skeptic that the God of Christianity exists.
I can't ultimately demonstrate anything. Only the Christian God existing can verify and demonstrate.
Why should we believe you when you just say that?
Why? Okay, good. Then why? Okay, then why should you believe in beliefs for which you have no verification or justification for?
Because that's what everybody goes by. That's why everybody.
Okay, so you see the fallacy of what
everybody jump off a bridge.
Tim, So in other words, what you have now conceded to is you have an arbitrary standard or criterion for what you will believe in. In other words, you are saying is, I'll believe in the revelation of the Christian God if you can provide for me independent external justification other than the revelation of the Christian God. But if the Christian God exists, there can be no independent external justification outside of the Christian God's revelation. Now, but not only is that an incoherent request, your criterion is arbitrary because you want independent justification for the Christian God, but you do not have justification for the core beliefs about the nature of reality. I'll ask you this, Tim. Do you believe in the uniformity of nature? Okay. Do you believe that there are laws of physics and chemistry, and that the future will be like the past? Not identical, but it will be like the past. Well, of course you do.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have a means
These
of
aren't trick questions,
justifying that? You have no means by which to justify that the uniformity of nature exists. Do you know why? It's because everything that you see is indistinguishable from chance. But you believe in the uniformity of nature, but you don't have any justification for it.
You don't need a justification for an assumption.
People just trust it.
But you see, if you just believe it just because you believe it, then you now have an arbitrary reason for believing in some things rather than others. You demand a justification for a core belief in God, but you don't demand justification for the uniformity of nature.
Right, and it's a problem that we trust in the Christian God.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, without justification, yes.
Yeah, it's just.
How are you going to
You guys are just like that. You guys are just saying.
Hold on, wait, hold on. How are you going to have justification for something which is an ultimate authority? Like if logic is an ultimate authority, for example, how could you have justification for that ultimate? That makes no sense.
Well, hold on. One thing I do want to say is that I think both sides have some truth to them in this sense. I believe generally there are some things that you need justifications for, but I think in this instance, we don't have that justification. We can't say this is it. This is the justification that you need to satisfy this criteria. So it's kind of, well, I'm saying for me, I can't speak for anyone else in this room, but I'm saying I just don't know. But again, I hate to appeal to an analogy, but that's just like that blind man denouncing that the color red exists. And because I can't explain it to him, because I can't describe it to him, he is justified and I am justified in believing that there are no colors. That means colors don't exist because I can't explain it to this guy who can't understand it. I'm saying I can't understand it. But that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I grant that.
Okay, it may exist.
God can exist. I do grant that.
Well, guess what?
Freely.
You could. Okay, but here's the problem. The issue that we have in discussion is this: Tim wants a justification that is independent and external from the revelation of the Christian God. Okay? Now, number one, the problem with that is a logically incoherent request. Why? Is because if the Christian God does exist, then there cannot be an independent justification that it is the revelation of God, because the Christian God is the ultimate justifier of what the nature of reality is by virtue of his omniscience, omnipotence, and his always truthful revelation. So without the Christian God existing, nothing can be justified or verified or falsified unless you want to water down these words, verification and falsification or justification, simply to mean that you have varying degrees of confidence in beliefs that you cannot ultimately justify.
That's the whole argument, though. Like, just like, if it can't be justified, then why should I believe what you say?
Because You have a double standard. You
Exactly.
hold to core beliefs about the nature of reality. Let me ask you this question, Tim. In order for a belief to be justified, must the uniformity of nature be true? Would anything be justifiable if everything was just chance, including your thoughts and your vision and your experience? Everything was just chance. There was no regularity, no uniformity. Everything is just happening chance. There would be no justification for anything if chance was occurring. So the uniformity of nature has to be true in order for you, in your view, to seemingly justify something.
So
But do you have...
everything's chance?
Oh, no, I didn't say that. I said that you don't have the ability to distinguish or determine whether the uniformity of nature exists or every event that we see is a product of chance. Now, intuitively, human beings reject the idea that everything is chance.
No, I think I go by that because it's like it's a reality. I just like see it happening.
You see what do you believe?
Like the whole uniformity of nature thing.
No, you can't see the uniformity of nature. That's not possible. What you're thinking of, okay, what you're thinking of is you are observing consistencies. But those consistencies can be the product of chance, or they could be the product of uniformity. Let me give you an illustration of what I'm talking about. If you and I are playing dice, suppose I roll the dice 3 times, Tim, and each time they come up double sixes. Now, what produces those double sixes? Was it chance, or were the dice weighted?
Chance.
Well, how do you know the dice weren't weighted?
Oh man.
You do know that cheats in casinos have been caught with weighted dice.
But it seems unlikely though. Like
okay, do you know? Okay, wait a minute. It doesn't matter. Okay, Tim, let me ask you this question. Do you believe that we evolved over millions of years?
Billions of years.
Do you believe in evolution?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, good. Now, do you understand that the genome of the entire animal kingdom consists of molecular sequences in long chains? And the coding sequences are sequential and long? The improbability of random mutations followed by a step-by-step survival to produce the genetic code of the entire animal kingdom is as improbable as anything could possibly put down on a piece of paper. But you think it happened, right, Tim? So you believe, because by virtue,
I believe it.
Okay, no. But I'm not asking you about other evidence. I'm saying you believe that random mutations account for the genetic code of the entire animal kingdom in spite of its most astronomically improbable likelihood, right?
Well,
of course
yeah.
you do. Of course you do.
You could see
so
it.
Good.
Like,
So it doesn't matter. You see, according to your reasoning, it doesn't matter how improbable something is, because even though it's improbable, it still could happen, right?
well, if I see it and like if it's presented to me that like it could be known, like for the fossils,
Tim,
you see the bones.
Okay, Tim, let me explain something to you. When I roll 3 6s in a row, if I don't let you physically examine the dice, there is no way that you can determine whether the 3 6s in a row was the product of chance, even though it was unlikely, or that the dice were weighted. Do you know that I played backgammon with my son one time? I got 3 6s in a row.
Wow.
And the dice were fair. They were fair dice. They were not weighted. So just because something is improbable doesn't mean it can't happen, unless you believe that with increasing improbability, it means that it's probably not the case. But you see, you're already committed to believe that it doesn't matter how improbable it is. It doesn't matter how improbable it is. It could still happen, right? So therefore, when you look at the consistency of events, out in the real world, you intuitively think, well, these repeating events have to have some underlying repeating cause, such as physics and chemistry.
If they're well tested.
No, you can't test the uniformity of nature, and the very act of testing assumes the uniformity of nature. So how can you test the uniformity of nature if you have to assume the uniformity of nature in order to test?
Well, you know what? Let me answer that. And I hate to go back to this stupid analogy, but I think this is a good point to see the analogy through. We all agree that there is no way you can explain any kind of color to a blind man. It just wouldn't work. How would you describe yellow? Green? It just wouldn't happen. But yet that blind man can be affected by these same colors. For instance, when he's crossing the street, he stops at red lights and he goes across at green lights. The colors have an effect on his life. You can say, well, when you were able to cross the street, that's a red light. And when that light is red at that time. And then when you can't, it means it's green.
How does he know? How does he know it's red? How does he know it? How does he know it's red?
Because, for instance, he stops. I don't know. There's like this. So I think they used to have like this special clicker or whatever that would let them know that when they couldn't cross.
He's using sense perception.
But that's what I'm saying. But at that point, I can tell him that sense perception is red or green or whatever. When you stop, it's red, and when you go, it's green. And I said it backwards before. But he wouldn't be still. He would, these colors have an effect on his life, but he wouldn't be able to describe them. He wouldn't be able to say, this is what red is. He couldn't even understand really the concept. But yet, when he comes to the red light, he knows the light is red, and he knows when the light is green. Even though he can't describe it to anyone else. And that's what it almost seems like you're asking me to do. You're asking me to describe something that we all kind of understand is there. We all may not know why it's there, but it works.
Yeah.
And we're trying to understand why it works.
You trust it.
Okay. Again, that argument doesn't work. All right. Because we're talking about justification. That blind man is ultimately resting upon and trusting upon the sense perception and color perception of those who it can see. So he has to take for granted and believe that you have a color perception.
He has to believe that he sees.
Right. So what the point I'm trying to make to you, Tim, the point I'm trying to make to you is this: is that you. And this is not a criticism of you. It's just an observation. And it's to try to get you to think. You have an arbitrary criterion for what you will believe in. When it comes to God, you want independent external justification other than God himself and his revelation. You would reason, I want proof or evidence. I want justification. And we say, the proof of God's revelation is that he has said so. He's revealed it. And you reason, well, anybody could say that. But do you understand that if the Christian God exists, there is no independent means other than God himself? Now, so for example, let me ask you this question. What if I told you right now the Christian God exists, and he was going to give me revelation about personal details about you that no one could possibly know except you? And then one by one, I began telling you, right? Now, suppose I went, Tim, you're 21 years of age. And let's say you're 21. And you go, oh, wow. But you know what you would do? You would say, oh, come on. You can tell by the sound of my voice, and you got a lucky guess that I was older than 16 and younger than 29. And so you figure out there, okay, so it's like 1 out of 15. And then suppose I tell you another personal detail. You see, with each additional detail that I'm telling you, the improbability grows. At a certain point of me giving you personal, intimate details about you, where you don't conclude that I'm working for the NSA or the CIA, having access to your stats somewhere in a computer bank. At a certain point, you're going to be so overwhelmed that I'm giving you personal information that nobody could possibly know, that you're going to completely rule out chance of me getting it correctly. But the thing is this, I could guess these details, couldn't I? Right?
Well, if you get all the answers right, then it'll be more likely than.
Suppose I told you your family childhood phone number, and then suppose I told you your social security number, and then suppose I told you, well, couldn't I by chance tell you these things? At a certain point, you're going to say, no, it's not chance. Either there's some human agency or divine agency involved. But you see, that me telling you all of these personal details, so let's say it's dozens and dozens and dozens of very personal details that nobody could know but you. I could still be getting them correct by virtue of making lucky guesses, right? And so at a certain point, you can't distinguish between whether this is from a divine agency who has supernatural knowledge that's been imparted to me, or that I'm just being lucky. You're just going to decide that, nah, it can't be chance, because if it was chance, sooner or later I'd make a mistake. But you see, that would contradict your own reasoning, because after all, you believe that the random mutations over millions of years produced the genome in spite of the most unimaginable improbability. So you see, so verification is done by that which comports to the beliefs that you choose to accept. Now, many people go, they go, that's right. That is exactly what verification is done. Okay.
I mean, it seems more likely though, because like you can see all these things.
No. There, you can't use likelihood. By the way, do you know that probability, if you say it's more probable or less probable, guess what? That's assuming the uniformity of nature. You cannot have probabilities without there being some level of uniformity of nature. Okay? So you can't sit there and say, well, it's more probable that there's a uniformity of nature than everything being by chance, because I would probably see some inconsistencies. You can't, that doesn't follow. So you see, verification is simply somebody presenting a conclusion or information that will comport with whatever you choose to believe about the nature of reality.
Are you saying that we just have to believe you because we just have to believe?
Okay, let's.
Christian
I know
God?
this can be confusing. The more you think about it, the easier it gets. Verification from your worldview as a skeptic. There is no ultimate means of verification. You've already rejected circular reasoning. There can't be an infinite regress of justification. So verification for you would be any proposal that somebody gives to you that comports with your fundamental assumptions about the nature of reality for which you cannot justify or verify. That's what verification is in your worldview. There is no ultimate verification in your worldview. Not only is it logically incoherent, and by the way, I'm not criticizing you or saying that you're a dummy or anything like that. I am saying it is literally logically incoherent to ask for an independent, external, ultimate justification that the revelation of God is the revelation of God. It's literally logically incoherent, because there cannot be an ultimate justification. And in addition, from your worldview, there can be no ultimate justification, because you have to stop ultimately at a collection of beliefs about the nature of reality that the people call properly basic beliefs or basal assumptions, for which you cannot justify. So when you ask for verification or justification of something, you're asking for a proposal about the nature of reality that will comport or cohere with what your fundamental chosen assumption, unverified chosen assumptions about the nature of reality are. So in your worldview, when you do not embrace the Christian God then there is no ultimate justification for anything. It's just where you think there's a justification. You understand?
A little bit.
I know. Trust me, it can be a little bit confusing. What we think from a secular point of view is justification is just somebody telling us that agrees with our basic assumptions. That's all verification is from a skeptical point of view.
Yeah, the point is, if you have an ultimate sort of authority, whether you call that authority logic, or would you, as Christians, whether we call it God, the ultimate authority cannot be have independent justification. It just makes sense. It will have to, the ultimate basis cannot have independent justification beyond it.
I got a question. Do you think what your view is justified? Like, why is it justified if we can't go by justifications?
Because the Christian God is the only means by which ultimately anything could be justified.
I can't see it right there.
I know it's a dilemma.
Like you say just because like I can't.
No, but do you understand? We're not saying that something is justified merely because something makes a self-claim. Like for example, if a Muslim comes to me and I say, well, how do you know that that's true? And they say, because Allah says it's true. Well, how do you know that Allah said that? And he says, well, because it's true. That's not what we're saying. We're not merely saying that the Bible is true just because it says it's true. What we're saying is the Bible is true because it is in reality the revelation from God. And somebody says, well, how would you know that?
You just repeated the same thing twice.
Well, you see, the reason why is because the Christian God's revelation can only be justified, just like anything can ultimately be justified, if the Christian God exists. If the Christian God does not exist, tell me one thing that we can justify is the case in reality. Just tell me one thing. The answer is you can't tell me anything. If somebody says, well, I know I exist. If somebody says, I'm sorry, go ahead, what'd you say?
A starting point, basic logic. Like
when
we first think about something, we composite.
No, those are assumptions for which don't have justification.
Oh my goodness.
Well, wait a minute. Do you have a justification that the uniformity of nature exists? No, you don't. Do you have a powerful belief that the uniformity of nature is true? Yeah, you do. Does your world only make sense if the uniformity of nature exists? Well, yes. But you see, the fact that it makes sense doesn't justify that it's true.
Feels like it makes sense.
What?
It feels like when I'm in reality, it seems like it makes more sense.
Okay, good. But do you understand that what makes sense does not logically necessitate that it's true? There are plenty of things that make sense. And by the way, this isn't directed at you or anybody else. There are plenty of things that make sense to mentally retarded children, but they're not true. Right?
But we could go by what other people think.
It doesn't matter whether it's one person or everyone on the planet. Just because everybody is in agreement, right? What if okay, let me give you an illustration. Tim, what if at one time there was absolutely unanimous agreement that the sun orbited the earth? Would that make it true?
Of course not.
Okay, good. Now, would it make sense that because of their sensory perception that it appeared to them that the sun orbited the earth? It certainly has an appearance of orbiting the earth, doesn't it?
Yeah. You know
but you see, you hold a belief right now that is contrary to what it appears. Okay?
Yeah, so, I'm tired. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I won't
yeah.
keep.
Yeah, I'll talk. I'll think about what you said, though.
All right. Okay. Listen. Even though we disagreed on some things, you asked very, very, very good questions.
Yeah, I'll probably like listen to it on the outside and like fall asleep.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to bed soon anyway. So, yeah. The reason why we believe in God is because without Him, nothing makes sense. If you don't believe in the uniformity of nature, the laws of logic, nothing makes sense.
That cleared the room. Well, I'm gonna get some rest too. Hey, listen, guys, Didi, it was great talk. You really laid it out. Gave everybody a lot to think about. So thanks again for taking the time. Thanks again, Antonio, for letting me come on.
No problem, bro.
All right. See you later.
See you guys next time.
See you, Antonio. See you, Dawkins.
Yeah. See ya. You see, Antonio, they want justification for God, but they don't realize that the very core beliefs that they have about the nature of reality, they have no justification for.
Yeah, exactly.
Intently believing that something is true is not a justification that it is the case, right?
Yeah, and I think this goes back to why exactly I wanted to start this hangout, like the role of faith for Christians and non-believers. They intentionally believe certain things and think they have good reasons for certain things too, but they want to object to us saying that, well, you Christians having an intent, faith, and belief that God exists doesn't make it true.
That's correct.
And they do the exact same thing they accuse us of.
Yeah, and so you see, we just don't. Our position isn't that we just have a strong belief that the Christian God exists. We're not just stating that. We're actually stating the Christian God has revealed things. And say, well, how do you know that? Well, how do we know anything? How is anything determined?
Yep.
Right? And you see, for the skeptic, something is determined to be the case is when that comports with their assumptions about the nature of reality. And those assumptions are chosen. They're not demonstrated. They're not justified.
Yeah, there's no such thing as an independent verification standard or line for everything. It can't exist.
Well, wait a minute. Yeah, well, there can exist. It's called the Christian God.
Well, up to the Christian God,
right?
Yes,
but outside
yeah.
of, but you see, if we abandon the Christian God, we can't even say outside of the Christian worldview that there can't be any justification. We can't say anything.
Yeah, because I mean, yeah, the atheist has no sort of ultimate standard other than the conventions of men,
right.
But
so you
the
say
conventions of men.
Okay, so they say, how do you know that? How do you know that? And then finally, we're going to get to a point where their final justification is their axiom, for which they don't justify. So every justification that they offer is simply standing upon a chosen assumption for which they cannot justify. So the very people who are asking for justification have no justification in their own system.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why people claiming that they can be rational, independent of the existence of the Christian God, is foolishness. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools.
That's right. And even if they do try to move it to a different God and say, well, just some other deists can do the same thing, at the end of the day,
that's an act of desperation. That's where they realize they've reached the end of their rope in skepticism.
Right. I mean, at the end of the day, even if I grant that, another theist could attempt that, does that make your atheism tenable?
No. Well, you simply say this. You ask the atheist, do you affirm the laws of logic? How would you be able to affirm the laws of logic? Allah is the great deceiver, right? Right? Allah is the great deceiver. Is Allah's revelation always truthful? Well,
Yeah, that's right.
according to the Quran, it's not.
Yep. You still got to give a basis for making your atheism tenable rather than just appealing to consequence and saying that it could be moved to some other theistic God. That doesn't give a basis for your atheism.
Oh, how about this? The Quran says Jesus didn't die on the cross. The Quran says Jesus is a prophet. Jesus said that he was going to be executed. He was going to be killed by the chief priests. So
Yeah.
did Jesus prophesy falsely? Well, then if the Quran is true, then the Quran is false.
That's right. Exactly.
Okay. So you see, if you hold to the law of non-contradiction, then the Quran goes out the window.
Yep. Yeah, man. They really have nothing at all. I think it's quite easy to beat them whether you use a presuppositionalist approach or secular approach. Because
hey, listen, don't forget for 1 minute. It's not that we're using a presuppositional approach and they're not. They most certainly are. They're just using a different set of presuppositions.
True.
But you see, we're not affirming that we merely have presuppositions. We are saying what they perceive to be our presuppositions is simply the byproduct of the revelation of the Christian God. And of course, their attitude is, well, I don't accept that. Well, of course you don't accept that because you have assumptions about the nature of reality that what our proposal does not comport to. And that's all you have, Mr. Skeptic, is that anytime you don't accept that something is the case is because it doesn't comport with your chosen assumptions about the nature of reality for which you cannot verify. So there is no ultimate verification unless people want to throw in the towel and say, well, gee, I guess we all have to start with these axioms. But you see, in the Christian worldview, why do we have to put God on trial and give up our basic starting points? They're not willing to give up their basic starting points. They're not willing to give up their axioms.
I absolutely agree with
that.
So
why should I give up my starting point that the Christian God has revealed himself?
That's right. That's absolutely right.
Why should I give up my basic beliefs? Well, that's not falsifiable. Well, is your belief system ultimately falsifiable, Mr. Skeptic? No, it's not.
Exactly. And I find it funny that don't want to come in these rooms and talk with us directly about this. What they'll do is they'll listen to us talking about it in the hangout and then post hangout tag us in videos and other stuff. Like you and I was tagged in some video about, oh, this is the explanation for extraordinary evidence, Antonio and DD. Like, y'all want to find some video.
I'm not really impressed by their Monday morning quarterbacking when they hear us talk on here.
Yeah, Monday morning quarterback. I like that.
Yeah.
That is hilarious. But I really love it when they do this post hangout stuff. They always try to tag us and stuff after the fact, and then try to bait us into these text exchanges.
Do you know what they did one time? I said,
yeah.
I said in one of the hangouts, I said a Christian cannot say that we cannot know we're a brain in a vat, right? Because if we accept the Bible as the revelation of God, then we know by virtue of God's revelation we're not a brain in a vat.
Yeah.
Right? But you see, what they did was they juxtaposed what I said to William Lane Craig on an interview saying, well, we can't know we're a brain in a vat. But you see, what the audience didn't know when they saw that edited clip, William Lane Craig was not speaking as a Bible-believing Christian. He was merely speaking as a philosopher.
Exactly.
And so what they attempted to do was make me look bad as though I was contradicting the all high and mighty William Lane Craig, somebody whom they reject and disparage anyway.
Exactly. Yeah, they'll instantly try to use someone like him to try to make strong Christians look bad, but then spinning his face left and right. When the very arguments he give are putting them to shame in every debate that he's in.
Yeah. You see, William Lane Craig, as brilliant as he is, he's not always speaking as a Christian. Sometimes he's just speaking as a philosopher who is arguing for Christianity.
Right.
Can you imagine the Apostle Paul saying, well, we can't know, we're not a brain in a vat? Well, that would completely contradict numerous things that he stated directly in the New Testament.
Yeah, that's right.
So even though they try to show that I somehow contradict William Lane Craig would tell you that, well, he was speaking as a philosopher, not as a Christian, because no Christian who affirms the inspiration and the contents of the Bible can say, well, we can't know, we're not a brain in a vat, because that would contradict what is revealed in the Bible.
That's right, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't looked into it like that, but and I'll have to look into it before I'm making any claims on it. But from what I know of, from what I can tell, I don't think William Lane Craig has like a problem with presuppositional apologetics. I mean, he doesn't argue for him.
He has criticized it.
Oh, he has? Okay.
Yeah, and he doesn't. But I haven't read enough of it where I could actually offer you an accurate representation. I do know that he has criticized it, but you have to understand this. William Lane Craig wants to rub shoulders in philosophical circles, and many philosophers would just, roll their eyes at a presuppositional apologetics, because ultimately presuppositional apologetics is a biblical presentation. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Everything is contingent upon the Christian God, and that includes logic and reason, the uniformity of nature.
But
everything.
As a philosopher, can he give a philosophical basis for why it's invalid or doesn't work?
Not as a philosopher, no, because unless you're speaking from the Christian worldview, you can't verify or falsify anything.
I would like to see his criticisms on it and see if they're consistent, from a philosophical standpoint.
Well, you have to understand he's an evidentialist.
Right.
But you see, presuppositionalists like Greg Bonson, and I've heard Greg Bonson with my own ears say, recordings, of course, that he doesn't disparage evidentialism. Evidentialism is a wonderful tool of apologetics, but not to the exclusion of biblical presuppositionalism.
Right. I personally don't have a problem with either approach, and I think either approach is very effective.
Well, if you present evidentialism apart from presuppositionalism, then all you're presenting are proposals that either will or will not comport with the chosen assumptions of the person you're speaking to.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So somebody considers that something is falsified or verified if it comports within their chosen assumptions and all of the rationality that they build upon those assumptions. So you can sit there and use amazing, I mean, literally mind-blowing evidential arguments that'll make a lot of people just shake their head and going, wow, there must be a God. But somebody who's committed to the idea that there's no God can simply say, well, all of these things can be explained by chance or some unknown mechanism.
Then you'd have to challenge their presuppositions, and then like what Matt Slick says, proof is different than persuasion.
That's correct. That's right. There is no proof in the skeptic worldview. There's no proof in science. Now, mind you, because of our Christian worldview, and we believe in the uniformity of nature, we believe that through a scientific process, through induction, we can uncover certain regularities, right? Because the Christian God has made us to know that there's a uniformity of nature.
Yeah.
But from a non-Christian point of view, they have to start from an assumption. And of course, they think that what we're saying are entire assumptions as well. They're just like, because they don't accept the Christian God, therefore their conclusion is, well, that's just your assumptions and I don't accept it. Good, then that's all you're stuck with in your worldview, is a layer upon layer upon layer of assumptions.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, when I'm seeing the evidentialist approach or the presuppositional apologetics approach given, at the end of the day, I think the truth of Christianity, the truth of Christ is revealed in all of it, and
Look.
even without
look. Let me explain something to you really quick. Let's take Adam and Eve.
Yeah.
Of all people who ever lived on this planet, did they not have the best, most available evidentialism?
They did.
And did they not reject the revelation from God? You shall not eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, in the day that thou shalt eat of, thou shalt surely die.
They certainly did.
They rejected that revelation. Now, I'm not saying they were atheists, but they rejected the revelation from God, and they had the greatest of all evidentialism.
Yeah, absolutely.
They didn't reject all of God's revelation. They didn't become atheists, but they rejected a part of God's revelation. So you see, evidentialism will not ultimately lead to persuading somebody.
Yeah. Yeah, but neither will presuppositional apologetics either. It's just a matter of the heart.
That's right. But you see, you're confronting them from within our Christian worldview, that when you embrace the Christian worldview, when you accept the revelation of God, this is the only means by which your world is not absurd. And you don't accept it, your world is absurd. Now, do they want to believe their world is absurd? No, they don't.
Oh, so you're not saying evidentialism is like an invalid form of apologetic. You're just saying that presuppositionalism goes deeper.
Evidentialism in its proper place, in conjunction with biblical presuppositionalism, is fine. But evidentialism to the exclusion, is not going to prove anything, because proof from a skeptic's worldview is that which conforms or comports to their chosen assumptions. Since their basic assumptions and all the rationales that are built upon that are chosen not because they're verified or justified, they're just simply chosen.
Yeah, and I do think it makes a lot of sense to say that they have basic starting points too that they work from, and then we should be just as justified as having our basic starting points, just like they are.
Oh well, they don't want to apply the same standards to their starting points.
Right.
They will not. Okay, they say, well, your God's not falsifiable. Are your core beliefs about the nature of reality falsifiable?
Right. The laws of logic aren't falsifiable to them.
No. Well, some of them will try to reason. Well, to deny it, you have to be even you would have to employ them. But the point is simply this: are the laws of logic falsifiable? No.
Yep.
What observation? Or they might argue, well, they could not possibly be true. How would you know that? How do you know that, Mr. Skeptic? Is it through sense experience? Or you just reason about the nature of reality?
There's not a chance they accept such an answer from a Christian. Or God cannot possibly not exist. Like, I think that we can say, I think there's a certain way we can argue that, but just as a basic statement to make, oh, it's not possibly true the Christian God cannot exist. If we were to say that, there was no way they would accept that. Or it couldn't be any other way. There's no way they would accept that on face value.
What they demand of the Christian for justification of the Christian God, they do not demand of themselves.
Yeah.
Oh, and for all you trolls and stalkers out there, I hope you enjoyed this hangout, and I'm sure you'll just take it upon your selves just to quote me out of context.
Yeah, I think with that, I'll go ahead and bring this hangout to a close.
Yeah, I gotta get to bed.
Yeah, but they're gonna be talking about this, and they're gonna be trying to tag me or you or both of us and stuff.
Good.
After the fact.
Let them. Let them.
Yeah,
and here's the bottom line. While they're wasting time and the clock is ticking away, moment by moment, they're getting closer to Judgment Day.
Amen. That's right. Y'all need to think about that, y'all. Repent.
Keep wasting your time attacking things that you claim you don't believe in and that you think are silly.
Yep. Think about that, y'all. Repent while you still have time.
Yeah.
Jesus is waiting for you.
They'll find out the hard way.
Amen.
All right, I gotta go.
All right. Thanks for coming by, man. And thanks for watching, everyone. God bless and peace.